Going up. Marking up.
Good evening. This is the July 31st meeting of the Town of Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. We have one item on the agenda this evening for public hearing. It's application of St. Vincent's Medical Center for a special permit to construct a two-story medical office building at 5545 Park Avenue, and an application to change the zone from residence R3 to a design commercial district. For the members of the public that are here, here's how we will proceed this evening. The applicant gets a chance to go first through their counsel and any expert witnesses they feel they would like to call. Once they've completed their presentation. Is that microphone? This one's facing the wrong way, maybe? Is that what you're getting? I think we're losing the audio. The audio went up. There it is. Now it's on. Testing. Working?
That's good.
How we're going to proceed this evening, the applicant will go first through their counsel and any expert witnesses or fact witnesses they call. Following the conclusion of their presentation, we go to any member of the public, and any member of the public will have an opportunity to come up and address the commission with any comments or concerns or one way or the other. If you have any questions and you're a member of the public, you can pose them to the commission, and we have a chance to ask them to the applicant. Once the public is done speaking, we go back to the applicant for any final comments and a conclusion. And with that being said, Attorney Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Good evening. For the record, my name is John Fallon. I'm an attorney here in Fairfield, and I'm representing St. Vincent's Medical Center, which is the applicant with regard to this application or applications. First of all, again, I thank the Commission for their willingness to be here tonight for this special meeting during the summertime. It's deeply appreciated by my client, and hopefully it'll be an efficient way for us to get through this promptly tonight to everyone's benefit. The subject property is located at 5545 Park Avenue, and the applications, as you know, before you tonight involve an application to change the zone of the property from its present R3 to design commercial, and subject to that being granted, a special permit and site plan approval application, which according to your regulations we will hear at one hearing. Our purpose is to construct a two-story medical office building comprising a total of 25,000 square feet. Our presentation tonight, which will be in PowerPoint, I do it. I like to get close.
Watch the wires.
We learned that when we were doing jury work. The only time you get close.
I'll pass. You want to go around?
What I'm doing tonight is we're going to be presenting PowerPoint. For your convenience, both this evening and since you're going to be taking this material home with you,
John.
I got it. Everybody's worried my hip is fixed.
We're worried about the equipment, not your head.
Well, I appreciate that. This is a package of the slides that you'll see behind you. And of course, we'll make part of the record the PowerPoint itself, and you'll have this as well. But this is basically for your convenience now, as you consider the application before and during your deliberations. Could you just put up the first slide, Mike? I said a medical office building, and I want to emphasize that to you. This is going to be solely for professional offices. As permitted in the zone, we seek you to change the zone to. There will not be any emergency clinics here. There will not be any walk-in centers. There will be nothing but doctors' offices. Doctors affiliated with St. Vincent's Hospitals, doctors who are already treating patients in the area, but who desire to have a location in Fairfield and find this location to be particularly a good one because, as I'll elaborate on, its location. But it will be used strictly for medical offices. Now, if you could go to the first slide, Mike, which is just a general view of the area. And this would be the first, I think, real slide in your package.
I think there's a question on the first slide.
Just for
Attorney
medical
Jacobs.
offices, are they going to do any procedures in those offices?
Only the type of procedures that would happen in a doctor's office regularly. A dermatologist might remove a mole, etc. But there will not be any outpatient surgical center or anything like that there. But there will be normal procedures that doctors perform in their offices, as we're all familiar with that now.
Will there be a lab? Will there be an X-ray department or
Only X-rays that would be located, again, as part of a doctor's own practice, but no X-ray area, no lab area. The doctors, it's strictly doctor's offices. It's what you see at the Brick Walk and other places that we're all familiar with.
going on that same bit? It's becoming very popular to have things like endoscopy centers and stuff like that. Will you be running any endoscopy suites?
No. The
No
answer is
colonoscopy, endoscopy, none of those?
no. Those kind of outpatient clinics, treatment facilities will not be part of this.
Thank you.
This rather small but important Commissioner Parker.
In this situation, then, the doctors would actually be independent of St. Vincent's and paying rent on the facility?
They are correct. They are doctors who are affiliated with St. Vincent's Medical Center, but who maintain practices in the area. And this 25,000 square foot building would facilitate offices for those physicians affiliated with St. Vincent's to have a presence which they consider to be a superior one here in Fairfield. Okay? Let me just
Attorney Fallon, are there any provisions for the overnight keeping of patients, such as a sleep center or anything like that?
This will be a facility that, as you'll hear in a minute from Mr. Caniff on behalf of the hospital, is basically going to operate as a traditional medical office, primarily, 7:30 to 5, whatever doctors operate.
Attorney Fallon, could you use the microphone? We're not picking you up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
7:30 to 5, what you know to be medical offices now, perhaps some doctors Saturday morning, but that's it. There won't be anything beyond that. Now, if you look at the slide, either behind you or in front of you, I'll point with the pointer. That is our site right there, okay? It borders the Merritt Parkway, which you can see running along here. What we've done, and I think the graphic that you have in your small package is probably better, is we've tried by color coding to show you the residential areas, the institutional and educational areas, the healthcare uses, the religious uses, and the municipal uses. So if you go around, this entire area here is Sacred Heart University, that whole horseshoe, okay? In the middle of the horseshoe sits the Jewish Home for the Elderly. Over here sits the Ludlow Rehabilitation Center, okay? And next to that, and abutting our property, is Notre Dame Catholic High School. This is a church. I forget the denomination, but Orthodox Church. And across the street directly before us is the Golf, what is referred to as the Golf Digest Medical Building. That is a building that as you may know, was built for Golf Digest as their headquarters. They vacated it some years ago, and it is now used for medical office as well. So the intent of this slide, and it gets directly to your considerations of everything, but certainly most especially in your planning function, the zone change application, is to give you some context. There are residential properties, which are shown here in blue, along the perimeters, but none of them abut the property, and the property is basically buffered by these various healthcare, religious, educational, and institutional uses. The simple fact of the matter is that the property comprising 105 square feet approximately, bordered by Park Avenue on the east, on the north by the Merritt Parkway, and on the west and south by land owned by the diocese, that being the Notre Dame Catholic High School, is not suitable. You've probably been out there, or you will. It doesn't lend itself to residential development. It sits as an island of residentially zoned property at this location. And what you're going to need to consider in your adjudication of this application, in your planning function, is whether or not this is an opportunity and appropriate under the legal standards that we'll talk about this evening to change this zone. It is not unusual, and you, ladies and gentlemen, have seen it many, many times over the years, and I have too. Property, in terms of its zoning history, can sometimes be unique. It is a fact that many of these uses that I've talked about are special exception uses that are permitted in the zone. However, they still are institutional uses. And certainly the medical building across the street is a medical building. And so what we ask you to consider as you review this application is, with this property so located right adjacent to the Merritt Parkway, which, by the way, lends itself very well and extremely well to the proposed use, because it's going to make it convenient for people in the region, including Fairfield, to avail themselves of these doctors, whether this is a good opportunity, looking at time and circumstances and the development of the area, to suggest that perhaps medical office would be well established here, would benefit the interests of the community, would not damage in any way the neighborhood. Now, with regard to the zone change application, again, if you change the zone, then section 12.4.3 permits medical office use. And as we will try to demonstrate, hopefully successfully to you in our presentation, the use we propose of this fairly modest in size medical office building, and with the attendant attention to detail that we have taken with regard to the architectural design and the very, very significant landscaping plan, it will be a use that's going to harmonize with its surrounding and its diverse uses in the area, including the residential uses, and will have not any adverse impact with regard thereto. Now, you did receive, we made a presentation a few weeks back to the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council, and I believe your record includes that letter of July 24th, 2012. I will not read that letter in its entirety, but I do commend the council for their findings that, in fact, it was the consensus of the commission that the zone map change could be have a positive regional impact, but for the following conditions. And these are conditions that certainly, I think, can be easily addressed. First of all, there is a reference to the change of zone, and that somehow if the zone is changed, the property might be used for other purposes. I think what is overlooked there in the comment is obviously any use here in this design district will still require a special permit review. So in the unlikely event, which isn't as a practical matter going to happen, that St. Vincent Medical Center got these applications approved, but then determined not to build the medical office building, it would not give anybody else the right to do anything other than on this property than build this medical office building, same size, same architectural design, because this is a design district. And as far as the configuration of the roundabout, we'll address that. I think that we did not have an opportunity on the night we were there to present the council with the material that we had from the state that has looked at this. This is the same roundabout, very same roundabout. Mr. Galante is our traffic consultant. He was the traffic consultant for Sacred Heart's recent application that you heard and unanimously approved with regard to their new School of Business. This was the roundabout that was submitted as part of that application. It's not new. And it was a roundabout that, when it was submitted, showed exactly the location of our proposed driveway as we propose it and as the state has reviewed it. But we are pleased that the council did focus on the very unique location here in terms of its regional benefits, because, as I said, if you know the area, which you all do, it's conveniently located to Bridgeport, Fairfield, Trumbull, Easton, and therefore really benefits the very thing that St. Vincent's is trying to accomplish here, and that is to provide a convenient location for its affiliated, some of its affiliated doctors to have their private medical practice offices to benefit people who serve in the community. You have to look at the Plan of Conservation and Development. You all know that. That is your planning document. You're not bound by its terms, but the law does indicate that you should be able to make a judgment that the proposal is not inconsistent with your Plan of Conservation and Development. And you're familiar and sophisticated enough to know that people who are arguing for and against zone changes can and will point out to you references of the Plan of Conservation and Development that support the argument for the zone change and would be deemed not to support the argument for the zone change. So what you have to do is you have to look at your common sense and the intent of the zoning regulations and the Plan of Conservation and Development and decide, well, really, what are the planning goals here that are reasonable and fundamental considering this property. And in that spirit, I would cite you on page 58, section Roman numeral 3.10, economics,
Page 58 of, what are you referring to?
of the Plan of Conservation and Development, which I'm sure will be part of the record. But you cite a number of economic goals there, and a number of them I think are pertinent here. To encourage economic development that provides jobs and services for our population, that's number one. Number three, to support the Economic Development Commission in its efforts to encourage a proper range of economic activities and long-term economic development and renewal. I'll pause there for a second. You obviously have received a letter after we made a presentation from the Economic Development Commission. It's dated July 23rd, 2012. Does everybody have a copy of that? Again, I am not going to read that to the Commission, but I hope you will read it, because I think it has very fundamental importance in terms of your consideration of this application, and most particularly the zone change portion of the application, because it shows the consistency of what we're trying to do on this piece of property with these economic goals. Another economic goal that you cite, number 4, is to assure economic stability and growth in cooperation with adjoining Bridgeport area towns. I think that's very pertinent to this application, because in fact you do have a piece of property that lies at this crossroads, if you will, of a number of our regional neighbors. And then number 5, to designate sites with proper access for appropriate economic use that will not be detrimental to established residential uses. I believe that certainly is the case here. There are no abutting residential uses, and there is no activities associated with this particular development that will have adverse impact on any residential areas. In addition, on page 59, you cite goals for social services. And one of those, number 3, is to coordinate health facilities within the region to meet the needs of the people. To coordinate health facilities within the region to meet the needs of the people. St. Vincent's Medical Center is one of the primary and fundamental health services providers in this region. And we can tell you that there is a need for a facility such as this, so that our doctors who serve so many people in our community and some of the other communities that abut us have such a location. And therefore, I think that the application is certainly consistent with those goals as well. When you look at the whole application that we're about to present to you, and you look at it by the standards of your special permit regulations, I hope you'll agree after consideration that the topography, the sensitivity that we have brought, we hope you will agree to the design of our landscaping and our lighting plan and our building itself, will ensure that this medical office building that we propose is in harmony with the area, and as I'll touch on at the end of our presentation, consistent with your standards for approval of special permit applications, and is not going to have any adverse impact with regard to any properties in the general area. We received the unanimous approval from the Inland Wetlands Agency with regard to this proposal. That's Inland Wetlands Permit number 211-1204. We had a code enforcement review session, which those minutes I'm sure are part of your record, on April 3, 2012, and we certainly have and will comply with any and all comments associated with that review. I've already mentioned the application or the presentation that we made to the Department of Community and Economic Development and their response, which is part of your record. And the last thing I would like to mention in closing my preliminary remarks before I introduce our presenters. The Commission is well aware that this property, some year and a half or 2 years ago, was the subject of another application. I was not a party to that application. I am familiar with that application because I sat through large portions of both the presentation and your deliberations. You will recall that that was an application that sought a form of medical utilization of this property, and did so under the guise of a special exception, indicating that they fell within the rubric of a convalescent hospital or nursing home. I was not altogether sure, as I sense some members of the Commission were not, in terms of exactly how they were defining what terms. You all sat through that, and you know what you felt about that application. It was my take, having listened to you, and without in any way feeling that you were prejudging anything that had to come before you, because it has to be reviewed on an individual basis. That there was some sense that this property, as located and with its uniqueness, might not be an improper use of medical office if it was established there, subject to the full review that you'd have to make at that time. But that the commission felt that the application before them at that time was not a duck, it didn't quack like a duck, it didn't walk like a duck, and there was great concern about approval of the application, thus setting a precedent that could be employed in other residential zones in terms of some broad and ill-defined idea of what a special exception use might be as categorized. I reported that. I was actually monitoring this because St. Vincent's has had an interest in the property. And again, what I came back and I told the client was, look, you've got to make an application. The application would have to be a zone change, special permit, and site plan review. There are no guarantees. However, there seemed to be some sense that a proper, conservative, well-presented, well-designed plan for a modest medical office building befitting the size of this property might receive reasonable consideration because there was some dialogue that would indicate that there was a realization and an acknowledgement that this piece of property is unique and we got to do something with it, and it doesn't lend itself to one 105,000 square foot lot in the R3 zone located where it's located. And that's what we want to present to you. And we're hoping that you'll feel, hey, you know, they didn't come in and try to play a shell game. They came in and said, yes, we want you to consider in your planning function changing the zone, but we think we have an application in its aesthetic beauty and in its protective aspects, and the nature of the uses we'll define more clearly momentarily, that makes this a good vehicle for dealing with that zone change and removing this property once and for all from planning considerations in terms of, well, what are we going to do with it? So, our presentation tonight.
Commissioner Parker, excuse me 1 second, has a question.
In my packet, I have the letter from the Economic Development Commission.
Yes, ma'am.
And there's a statement on there, could yield significant net new tax revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is both a hospital in ownership and it's also a
This is
religious
taxable.
institution. Is it subject to Fairfield property taxes?
It is not. St. Vincent's Medical Center is, it is. I mean, St. Vincent's Medical Center is a tax-exempt entity,
Exactly.
but this facility is going to be a building that we're going to rent space to doctors to use. So it will pay its full boat of taxes.
Commissioner Kennelly?
Mr. Fallon, you mentioned that there'll be doctors who will be having their practice. Yeah, I'm sorry, could you pass? Thanks. You mentioned that there'll be doctors who will be locating their practices here to be close to the medical center. Is there a sense from the applicant of where those doctors are coming from? Are they primarily now Fairfield-based, or are they from surrounding communities?
Part of our presentation. We'll give you an overview of that as part of our presentation, of more in-depth consideration of how the building will be utilized. Mr. Fallon.
If the doctors were going to be renting from St. Vincent's, and you said St. Vincent's exempt, how is the tax going to be?
Because it's profit. We're not going to claim a tax exemption here. Because it's a rental facility that's going to be owned and operated by St. Vincent's. We have others. You know, we pay taxes. The hospital in Bridgeport is a tax-exempt facility, but when we develop a rental office here for the convenience of some of our affiliated doctors and our patients and their patients, that's not tax-exempt. So, presentation this evening. We have Walter Jobst here tonight, and Walt will take you through, from the Hunting Company, a brief overview of our existing conditions and the proposed site conditions and site engineering. All this obviously has been reviewed by the Town Engineering Department and the Inland Wetlands Agency as part of their review, but we wanted to give you that overview. David Stone from Antonazzi and Associates is here. They and he are our architects with regard to this particular facility, and he will talk to you about the exterior architectural design and basically overview for you the interior floor plans. We also have Tara Vincenta, who's a principal at Artemis Landscape Architects. I've asked Tara to also make a brief overview. We're very proud of our landscaping plan. We are sensitive to the fact that we're in a gateway area here, and as she will elaborate, we really, under her very talented guidance, tried to take some ability to keep both the entrance of this particular facility very low impacting, residential somewhat in character, and also to make sure that the interior landscaping plan was very, very aesthetically appropriate. Michael Caniff, who's the Director of Real Estate and Facilities Development at St. Vincent's, will give you an overview with regard to, as I said, the more in-depth, how we're going to use the property, how we've looked at the property in terms of the surrounding area, what we've tried to do to make sure we'll harmonize with all the diverse uses that are shown on the map that's behind you. And then we'll have Michael Galanti, who will make a presentation to you with regard to the traffic access and impact study that he has submitted as part of this application. So at this point, I'd like to call on Walter Jobst of the Huntington Company.
Yeah, Mr. Jacobs is going to have a question first, but before we go to Mr. Jacobs, is Mr. Jobst the person who can address what I foresee are a number of questions regarding the parking lot design, or does that go to someone else? Just so we know who's the best, or is that Antonazzi who will be addressing that?
I guess it depends what the question is, but certainly Mr. Jobst is a resource for that. Mr. Stone is a resource for that. Mr. Galanti, if it's an ingress and egress and circulation, might be. Okay?
We'll pose them to Mr. Jobst, and he could lateral if necessary to Mr.
Okay.
Stone and Mr.
So at this time, I'll introduce...
Mr. Jacobs has a question.
Mr.
on,
Jacobs.
Code review.
On the code enforcement review,
Uh-huh.
you're going to be following everything that was recommended?
Yes, sir.
Now, since one of the things that showed up here that I'm looking at has to do with the sewers. Now, we just got through the major problem with the sewers with St. Vincent's a block away.
It's a very good point. We have our sign
Have
off.
you actually gotten permission from Bridgeport to go into the Bridgeport sewer system?
We have, and rather than hold you up now, I should have mentioned that. I'll call on Mr. Jobst, and when he's finished, I'll have for you the document. Okay, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you.
Mr. Jobst.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Walter Jobst. I'm a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor in the state of Connecticut. I'm employed by the Huntington Company, which has offices here in Fairfield, and we were the site engineers for this project. As Attorney Fallon had said, the property is bounded on the north by the Merritt Parkway, on the east by Park Avenue, and on the south and west sides by Bridgeport Diocese. The site's approximately 2.4 acres in size and is sloped from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. Presently has a residence and garage with a driveway and several outlying sheds and other buildings. We have a trapezoidal wooded area, which doesn't really show up on this slide, but did on the previous one. To our west, that is property of the diocese, and that intervenes between our site and the residences on, I believe, Weeping Willow Lane. We have two off-site wetlands, one long linear wetland on the north side that runs in the low area as our site slopes to the north, and then another area, a wetland area to the northwest. That's a low area that is located at the northern portion of that trapezoidal property of the diocese, and all of our site runoff drains toward either this long linear wetland or this pocket wetland, I'll call it.
Those wetlands aren't actually on the site, though, are they?
They are not on the site. They're off-site. They're, the long linear one is within the state right-of-way for the Merritt Parkway. The other one is, a portion of it is on the diocese property. The remainder is also within the state right-of-way. Those two wetlands collect water from the surrounding area, drain it toward the west, where it eventually enters the state drainage system, and ultimately Mill River further to the west.
How much of a slope are we talking from that southeast to the northwest borders right now?
You're looking at about a 50-foot, more or less, drop from the southeast corner to the northwest corner. Over that distance, just 300, 400, 500 feet. Let's see, next slide. Now, our proposal is to demolish the existing structures and improvements on the site, construct a 25,000 square foot medical office building with its attending parking. We're going to put in a new drainage and detention system, and that'll all be part of our overall stormwater management plan. And this plan is a multi-tiered approach was employed, so we have several various different elements as part of this. This plan, by design, will provide for groundwater infiltration and recharge, for TSS removal, for peak storm attenuation, and is consistent with the recommendations as set forth in the DEP Stormwater Manual. Our stormwater management plan will intercept all runoff from our site and from off-site that drains onto us, and have that drain into our system, where we'll clean it, renovate it, and reduce the peak outflow. We've reviewed the surrounding area of the site because ultimately we have a slope from our south toward the north, toward our property, and then eventually toward the Merritt Parkway. So we have some runoff off of our site to the south that enters our site. We've looked at that and incorporated that runoff into our design and our hydraulic model.
You can jump ahead.
Our
Could you-
easterly parking area, located in the front of the building, will be made of porous pavement. We've used that at several other sites to great success. Seems to work fairly well. So we've proposed that on the front, where we'll have the main entrance of the site that will allow for groundwater infiltration, groundwater recharge in that area. The remainder of the site, this lighter gray, will be your regular asphalt pavement, and we'll have a typical storm drainage system.
Mr. Jobs, looking at this drawing, it appears from some of the subsequent pictures we have that there's a downhill slope from the back of the building to the westerly property line going this direction.
Correct.
What are these numbers? Could you read these numbers, this number and then this number?
That's-
We can't
those
see them on
are-
our handouts, they're too small.
Those are the proposed contour.
And what are those numbers? I can't see them.
And
Is
that
that the same
varies
drawing?
from 278 here to 264 at the low spot here.
That's you're going to have a 14-foot drop in the parking lot downhill?
That's correct. And that parking lot is a 5% slope or less.
And then if you look at one of the cross sections, it shows a significant drop of some type of, it looks like right here, somewhere here. There's a cross section in the drawings we have that looks like it's got to be
Well, this is...
10-foot, 15-foot
This,
retaining wall?
well,
or
what
something?
happens here is there's a retaining wall because of the grades along this portion of the parking lot. Our detention basin is located just to the west of the parking, and it's basically a basin, a hollow, that we're going to collect the water and store it temporarily. So we will be building a retaining wall along here to take up the change in grade. We will be needing refilling in this corner here to raise this pitch across the parking lot so that we can maintain a 5% or less slope across the parking lot.
How high a retaining wall is that going to be?
It'll be about 12 feet, 13 feet at its highest, which would be in this corner here.
Is that something the residents on Weeping Willow will be able to see?
No, I don't believe they will, because this basin will be planted and screened as part of our landscape plan, which you'll hear about later. We have in this area a large wooded area to our west that is part of the Bridgeport Diocese land that's completely wooded.
Later in our presentation, not to interrupt Walter, we are going to be giving you some site views just
Thank you.
to address that. It's in your package now, but don't jump ahead.
Okay.
But you'll
Too late.
see that. Nobody jumps ahead. Okay, so but we will give you something more visual to address that.
Mr. Jobs, on the design of your parking lot, you know, I got excited when I read the letter from the economic development. They talked about alternative energy technologies and sustainable design features. Then I looked at the parking lot, which is a massive expanse of asphalt with no islands, no trees, no depressed islands, just a lot of asphalt with 4 little spots, almost like an afterthought in the corners where we'll put some grass in.
No crosswalks.
No crosswalks, no. Is there a reason you just, the lot, and this may not be your question, if it's not, you know, if it's Mr. Stone's or someone, let us know, who can address the design of the parking lot. You talk about the plantings, but then you have a massive parking lot with nothing in it except asphalt.
Well, we do have these 4 islands at the end of these parking rows. Those will be planted with not only grass, but trees as well, be planted around that, which will be gone into further along in the presentation.
I think those points let us present in terms of the landscape plan, and then, you know, we can certainly take your feedback. The one thing I would say about what portion of it is, at the request and suggestion of the engineering department, as referenced in the code enforcement notes, you know, we have created that porous pavement area.
In the front of the building, you're
In
talking
front
about.
of the building.
So,
Mr. Galante, I assume, is going to address, or maybe not, is someone going to address the parking spaces required and how many you have under this design?
we can.
I will address.
Yeah.
I might as well address that now. Our parking requirement, have a 25,000 square foot building at 1 parking space for every 200 square feet, which gives us a total requirement of 125 parking spaces. Our proposal is for 129 spaces. We have 4 extra. If there's no further questions.
Is the, you know, is the southern boundary of the property, this boundary, it looks like the northern boundary, you're right up, the parking lot's right up against your property line, correct? That's the property line right there?
This dark black line there is the property line.
And this is then the property line in the front, correct?
That's correct.
And this is the southern property line, this dark line?
Correct.
And your back
And the
property
back property
line,
line is here. These are actually stone walls and then show up.
but that's down a significant slope, this area, this, whatever, this triangular area is down, that's a good 12 to 13 feet down. And that's where your stormwater detention is
That's
being built.
correct.
So basically, for us to start, well, I can see why. You've maximized the asphalt because you've taken up every inch of the property with parking lot or building virtually. And that's why the parking lot looks like it is. You have a little grass in front, but you have no islands in the middle because you're tight on spaces, it would appear.
Although we will give you some thoughts in terms of the input you're giving us as part of the presentation, things we can do to further enhance the landscaping in that back parking area.
Thank you.
We will address that.
Question?
Commissioner Suter?
Yeah. Just another question about the slope of the property. It seemed to me from looking at the plan that there's a contour line of about 300 feet near the front property line and about 250 feet at the rear property line, which is, as you said earlier, 50% drop-off from the street level.
Correct.
The driveway, therefore, must go downhill at a pretty steep incline. Do you know what the incline of the driveway is?
This driveway goes down at a, if I remember correctly, 10%. It's a 10% slope on that driveway in this portion here. Obviously flattens out here, flattens out in the parking in the front.
And in your experience, that's a fairly steep slope for a driveway, isn't it?
No,
No? Do you think it'll pose any problem in winter conditions where there's snow and ice?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
If that driveway were 800 feet long, it would possibly look much steeper than it is. But for this short section, a 10% driveway slope would not present any problem. Actually, your regulations call for a road to be 8%, but can be waived to a 10% slope. So it's within your regulations.
Okay, thank you.
We've had driveways that are 12, 15%.
Thank you, Mr. Jobst. Are there any further questions?
Just going to finish up with the storm drainage. We're retaining our 1 inch of rainfall on our site. Our detention basin, recharge basin, will be a wet pond, so we'll have some residual waters in the bottom of the pond. Over time, that was a requirement from conservation. The remainder of the pond will act as a detention facility for storm events. We're reducing all of our peak flows to a rate below what they presently are. So we're changing from the character of the land, which is now a residence and woods and some lawn, to an asphalt parking lot and building, which would generate obviously a lot more runoff. But through our design, we're reducing that runoff to less than what it is now. In compliance with the DEP Stormwater Manual recommendations, we're taking the 2-year storm, reducing that to its 1-year pre-development rate. And as part of the conservation approval, we're taking the 10-year post-development storm, reducing that to its 2-year pre-development rate. And in all other aspects, we're complying with the DEP Stormwater Quality Manual. As Attorney Fallon said, we've been reviewed and approved by the Conservation Commission, and we've been reviewed by the Town Engineering Department, and they find that our design addresses all of their concerns for the site.
Commissioner Parker?
Was there any consultation with the Parkway Commission or
The Merritt Parkway?
state?
No.
No.
Well, the state, the DOT certainly will address that.
Have they approved?
If it gets approval, then we'll have to go to the DOT, and those items will be addressed at that point in time. I don't foresee any problems in that aspect.
Mr. Jobst, are you the person to address the sanitary sewerage and how it's going to be pumped up to the street level and what the redundancy is for that system?
That would be me. We don't have a slide that shows this, but our sanitary sewer soil line will exit the building at its southwest corner.
Page are you on?
It's in your plans, but it's not on the...
2 of 5. It's the engineering plan. Soil line will then go to a pump chamber, which has been in a dual pump system. So that is set up so that pump A goes on, pumps the effluent up to the street. Next cycle, pump B goes on, pumps the effluent up to the street. If for some reason the capacity is more than one pump can handle, the second pump kicks on, and they both work pumping it up to the street. It also provides, if one pump should go down, you have an existing pump that's functioning that will work while you're repairing or replacing the damaged pump. It's designed to have a capacity, again, designed on having electricity and all of that functioning. If the electricity should go out, your usage drops precipitously, so you have more than enough storage within the pump pit to handle that. That answers your question.
What is the storage of the pump pit? How many gallons?
I think we specified a 3,000-gallon pump pit, and the usage that we would associate with that would be, for maybe 2 residences. So it's more than adequate to handle what flows are going to be
So if
going.
the power were to go off, you'd have 3,000
Well,
gallons of storage.
Right. And again, the usage would be much less. That's typically what we'll design is, worst-case scenario. If something should happen, get some elbow room in there.
Is there an emergency generator system that's being installed in this building?
Not at present.
That was your question?
That was my
That's what I
question.
thought, yeah.
Thank you, Walter. Just to get back to Mr. Jacobs' question, obviously, as we listened intently to the dialogue that ensued when this property was before you for the last application, as I elaborated on before, we also listened intently with regard to your application and review of the Sacred Heart building. So we immediately, the next day, contacted the Water Pollution Control Authority of the City of Bridgeport, and I didn't make copies, and I should have, and I trust Mr. Devanchik, so I'm going to give him my original letter, so please don't lose it. But what we have here, we were told by the Water Pollution Control Authority that they had already approved this particular hookup for this site for a 25,000 square foot medical office building, so we have that letter. And basically, what it indicates is your request to connect the sanitary sewer service of the proposed 25,000 square foot medical facility to Bridgeport sewer system was approved by the WPCA Board of Directors at their meeting on November 18th, 2008. Please note that the contractor will have to apply for the lateral connection permit from this office and remit the appropriate fees. Please be advised the maintenance of the lateral will be the responsibility of the property owner. The contractor owner will also have to get all necessary approvals / permits from the town of Fairfield, and the owner will be responsible for paying the billed at the ongoing usage rate to the City of Bridgeport WPCA. We were advised by Greater Bridgeport that this was originally granted, the prior application that you didn't approve, but it remains in effect, and as long as what we're doing is a 25,000 square foot medical facility, we do have permission, to hook into the sewers. And I'll give that, those part of your record now to Mr. Devanchik.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is David Stone, from Antonazzi and Associates, our architects, and he'll speak to you about the overview of our architectural design and the building itself.
Thanks, John. Mike, if you could leave this slide up for a second. Yep. Thanks. Just for a second. All right. Good evening. For the record, my name is David Stone. I'm a licensed architect with Antonazzi Associates out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. We've been working with St. Vincent Medical Center exhaustively, really, on this project. We've done a lot of designs and redesigns on this building for its architecture. And if I could start, really just walk you through our design strategy of the site itself. First thing we looked at is how does the building site in relation to its neighbors and to its traffic. And so what we did is we had the front of the building formally address the street frontage. So we have a dialogue and a relationship that's appropriate to the street and maintain the street wall corridor that exists on Park Ave. The second thing we did is we looked at the topography that we just talked extensively about on the site. And as you see, the use of this project is there's a small drop-off area in the front. And the reason we've done that small drop-off area is really to minimize the traffic and the appearance from the street. And what we've done is we put a majority of our parking, really all of the parking, to the rear. It's both screened by the building itself and by the topography, really virtually making it invisible from the street. What this done is our main entrance to the facility is actually in the rear. The building is 2 stories, but from the front entrance, the building's only 1 story, and we'll see that in the next slide. And actually, now I can take that to the next slide, Mike. So here is a rendering showing you a view of elevation from Park Ave. You can see what we've done with the massing of the building. As I just said, we've kept it to a 1-story scale. This is a transitional zone that we're really looking at. In between that residential component, which is all the way across the Merritt Parkway 15. Once you cross 15, you do come to this more, as Attorney Fallon said, institutional area. So we've still kept and respected that scale of the residential component, at the same time kind of giving you some characteristics of what you may expect of a professional office building. We've also brought it to a 2-story in the rear, as I've said, and we've incorporated a lot of architectural components, high-end architectural components, similar in scale to residential. We've broken the roof of the mass of the roof, creating several masses. We've created vertical elements, again, accentuating this entrance. All of our windows, all of our fenestration is of smaller scale. There's no ribbon windows, there's no storefront malls type entrance. This is all very small scale with New England flavor to it, looking at the details of the dormer and obviously the cupola at the top with the pediment, the broken pediment. And if I can get the next slide, Mike.
You know what, though?
We've also taken attention with the banding of the building. We think the banding of this building, the striation, helps alleviate the mass of the building with some reciprocation and fenestration of the project. This particular shot is the rear of the building. You can see where the road slopes down. So it goes from a 1-story to a 2-story mass. We're, as you can see, well screened naturally by the existing vegetation. And we'll talk later on about the implemented architectural landscape plan. Again, we maintained these smaller scale windows to the rear, and what we've done is we kept this pitched roof, which has a New England flavor to it, when in all actuality it's a flat roof. So it is a commercial project, and as you can see right here, this is the only one you can see from this angle, and if you're flying in a plane, you could see it. It's our rooftop unit. We actually have 4 rooftop mechanical units, but they're virtually invisible. You really couldn't get an angle from the ground to see them. So they have, it's great capacity. At the same time, they're screened both audibly and visually from the ground. We've also created some outdoor landscape area here, which is accessible by the pedestrians, both with the use of the owners of the facility and the patrons of the facility.
Where are your dumpsters located? Are they at that area at the end of your parking lot?
Yeah, it's exactly where they are. The back southwest, is it northwest corner of the project.
Northwest corner? And what are you planning on doing about them
Like
architecturally?
a screening. The screening will be appropriate and congruous with the rest of the design of the project. And I think the next one is the drive-through, Mike. What I've done is create a short little video here to give you an idea of what it may look like as you approach. You would be driving on the wrong side of the road right now, but it still gives you the intent of what it looks like. So you can see we're still nestled in the woods, but at the same time visible from the off-ramp. 1-story here, again, only drop-off in this area. And as we go down this 10% grade, you can see the building steps up, still maintaining the architectural qualities and some high-end characteristics. Dumpsters would be located in this back area here. This is the outdoor pedestrian area, and this is the main entrance. And you can see that, as I said, you can't even tell that it's a flat roof. I think it's a very attractive building. I think the materials are New England in quality and style. Characteristics are definitely maybe higher end of this area, but they're very contextual. And that's what I have. Do you have any questions?
Commissioner Parker?
Drive going down, there is no sidewalk along the driveway?
There's not, we don't intend a sidewalk at this point. Again, we have drop-off in the front and parking in the rear, really that pedestrian translation. Within the building itself, again, it's 2 stories, so there's a connectivity, obviously, between the stairs, so.
So someone would have to go through the building.
Right, from a use standpoint, that would be how it would work, I think, anyway.
Commissioner Alessi?
Yeah, Mr. Stone, I've been living up here for about 19 years now, and I can't tell you what General Electric looked like. Is there any reason why this building hasn't been backed up in the property so it wouldn't be so visible from Park Avenue and not see this big white structure from the road?
Well, certainly, well, one, it's only a single-story structure, so the height of it, we're probably talking from the eave itself in the 14-foot range, which is not even as tall as a box truck.
And what's the footprint?
The footprint of the building is, it's 50 by 40. 50 by 40, is that where, I think it's in that neighborhood, 50 by 75, I think, actually. But again, the mass of it is hidden by the topography. And we talked about, if you said, why would we not bring it away from the street more? Sometimes we talk about the street wall, and the street wall is the relationship of the building to the road itself. And if we pull that away too much, the landscape becomes a giant lawn. And it almost really detracts from the characteristic of the space. This is a transitional zone. All right, we do have other properties that are a little closer to the street itself. So we want to be respectful and I think in contextual with the rest of those buildings.
The other thing, Commissioner, just not to trip David, is in addition to trying to take advantage of the topography so that the building would not appear from the street to be overwhelming. The other issue, quite honestly, is parking. And, you know, if we want to achieve, we need to achieve the 25,000 square feet, which is not a big building. The option, if we put the building back, we have to put parking in the front, and we didn't want to do that. We know the commission, seriously frowns on that. So we felt that the best solution, and a very good one, was to take advantage of the existing topography to put the parking to the rear. Hopefully we can address the concerns that I've already heard relative to softening that parking area in terms of landscaping. But at the end of the day, and I don't want to get crazy, but to me, the way this thing I think is going to look from, especially when you see the treatment we're giving the driveway in terms of the landscaping plan, I think it's going to look like a very nice, big residential structure. It's not going to be out of character with an adjacent residential character.
And where's the handicap parking on the...
There's handicap parking at the drop-off entrance and also in the rear.
In the front and the back?
Yes, sir.
And as far as the, Commissioner Kirk said, you have the dumpster in the back. Is there going to be any medical waste in those dumpsters?
No.
How does that get handled?
Mr. Caniff will address that on there. He's going to address the business, the building operation, and that certainly be something he will address.
Okay.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Could you go over the finishes on the building? What kind of finishes, what siding is?
Yep,
what
I think
roof is?
our intent is, again, traditional in appearance, but also low maintenance. So most likely a fiber cement siding. There'll be it will look like a clapboard almost. We'd also have a paneling, again, some type of cementitious material. From 2 feet away, you're not going to be, even carpenters can't tell the difference between this fiber cement siding. It's used all throughout the New England area. Architectural shingles, obviously, on the roof. All of our trim work will be composite material. We're not talking drive-it or stucco. We're not talking anything of that level, that commercial, screaming commercial strip mall materials. We're looking something high-end residential to low-maintenance commercial.
Mr. Jacobson?
About a daytime.
Yeah, it's
So we don't have a lighting plan?
Is someone going to address the lighting plan, Mr. Fallon?
yes. We do have a lighting plan. It's a photometric, but is it in this
I thought I read-
presentation, actually? I can provide you the photometric
I'm
lighting
sure I
plan.
have it then.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
went
it's
through
submitted
it.
with the plan, we can
Yeah.
certainly answer questions you have, but the bottom line is, apropos of the design of the building, of the use of the building, the lighting is very low scale. The fixtures that we're proposing are not going to create any night sky issues.
There's no throw off the site. There are exterior building lighting that is required by code for egress issues and emergency safety issues, but obviously, there's going to be nothing that's visible. This is not a parking lot. or
Like
anything.
dark skylight.
Exactly, it meets the NFPA dark sky requirements.
Is the cupola going to be illuminated internally? That could turn into a large illuminated billboard very easily.
It is, but again, you'd have to look at the photometric drawbacks on that, because we're not allowed by our codes to have our light shed and have any spillage at all on neighboring
And
properties.
I'm not talking about spillage. When one drives by, you have enough internal lights on, you could light that thing up like a beacon, and it wouldn't spill off the property.
We're not allowed to see the lamps also, but it's the intent of the, I would...
So if we made it as a condition, there's no illumination in the cupola, that doesn't affect your design as an architect or the use of that space? That's a decorative space, I
It is
assume.
100% decorative. There's no access to the third floor.
Lettering on the building, you're not are you going to be asking us separately for any sign approval, Attorney Fallon?
We'll probably want some form of signage, but because we're not quite sure of that, we would plan on coming back with a separate plan. The signage will certainly comply with all your regulations.
Could you address, Mr. Stone, alternative energy technologies and the sustainable design features that Economic Development Commission is talking about? And also, when you're looking at the roof, this building seems to scream solar panels on the roof because no one can see them. It's flat, it's exposed, and I don't see any drawn on there. So could you talk about those?
I would love to. I was
Features.
actually the third person in New England to become a LEED accredited professional.
Exactly what I'm getting
I've been doing
at,
it for
yeah.
about 15 years now. I can tell you right now, everybody wants a solar panel, and it's probably one of the least green, energy-efficient items that you could put. It looks fantastic when you see them, because it makes you feel like it's an energy-efficient component. I make the argument that the majority of your environmentally friendly and sustainable elements is a well-designed building. And I say that with durability of materials, where you're not replacing those materials over and over and over. Also, the shape of the building itself, it's a square. It is the most energy-efficient shaped building that there is. It's efficient in its construction, limiting its waste materials and on-site construction requirements. It also is the most efficient to heat and to cool. We're looking at this system here. We're looking at a couple of mechanical systems we've looked at as a chill beam system, extremely highly efficient system. We're using that actually in another project with St. Vincent College, I should say. With the material, the glass is all low E. The screening of the southern facade is used with, we have awnings and light shades that reflect light into the building itself. All of our materials inside are low VOC. The exterior envelope of the building was really one of the cruxes of any component of sustainable design. We're exceeding any minimum code requirement for insulation, both in the roof and the exterior walls, and we usually put we put insulation at the foundation of the perimeter also. I think that Walter also spoke earlier about the pervious pavement in the front. It's a great solution. It really allows you to get a lot of infiltration that way. And we could also look at our roof will be a reflective roof, reducing the solar gain, but we could also apply the similar treatment to the parking lot to the rear, give you a higher albedo, which gives you a lower solar gain lowers the temperature in the area.
What would you apply to the parking lot?
You can actually, you make the asphalt itself a high albedo, which means it reflects the sunlight more. So when you walk out in the summer and the sidewalk's really hot, it's because it's too dark. And we can make it a little bit lighter. When you make it lighter, it is actually cooler. When it's cooler, it disturbs what we call the urban heat island effect, which is a big asphalt area just baking that heat and creating a big, wind hot tub, if you will, in our back. And we can cool that area. And we're already surrounded by so much vegetation that by mitigating that solar reflectance, we're already going to really reduce the temperature there.
Will you be seeking LEED certification for this building?
I don't think we'll be seeking LEED certification, only because the process of certifying a LEED building is usually counterproductive. We at Antonazzi, and this isn't a sales pitch, that's how we design. We don't think that designing successfully is an added service. We just simply incorporate it into all our designs. So I am the sustainable person in our office, and I push out every project that we do, and it really has become the standard in how we build. It's really this industry standard now also.
Commissioner Parker, Commissioner Kennelly.
With the change in the surface of the parking lot front and back, how will that be affected in the wintertime when you might use sand on one point and you might fill the pervious pavement?
Yeah, maybe Walter can speak to that better. They've used the surface here a lot in New England.
Where it can
Well, the pervious pavement in the wintertime, you won't necessarily need to sand it for the, you're not going to get any ice buildup because it's going to go through the pavement and into the ground. So there's really no need to sand the pervious area.
But you could fill it up if you were dragging sand from the other parts of the parking lot.
Well, I don't anticipate that would happen. It's a matter of maintenance. You'd get a vac truck and basically vacuum the parking lot like you would your rug.
Mr. Jacobs knows, I think, among others, I don't mean to pick on him, but we've been very successful with the pervious pavement maintenance at Fairfield University. And as he has said to people, and I have said to people, if anybody wants to know how easy it is to maintain, it really is, as long as you just understand it. And it's really worked out. We've been through, 2 winter seasons now, and it's really worked out great. So I think it will work very well.
It's also become the standard of most state facilities, so it really is the new industry standard.
Why did you not use pervious pavement in the back of the building then?
Well, there is a maintenance issue to it, one, and if I could be frank, it is a cost issue. I mean, at some point it becomes a counterproductive, investment. We look at and he can speak also, from a grading standpoint and from a water quality standpoint. There's a certain level of washing the pavement that is actually good for the area. And those things can get clogged really easily in that large expanse. So I think minimizing the scale of it is probably appropriate for the project.
Commissioner Kennelly?
Element there of conservation. They had previously reviewed this in the last iteration, and then we came back, and they were, and this is, and it's fine, but I think they were more comfortable with the detention pond solution that is shown here. And, if you had a fully, forgetting the cost factor, which is a factor, but it sort of became a non-starter for us because we were told, let's just keep the detention pond. Because obviously if you went to a whole pervious in the back, then you'd have, you wouldn't need the detention pond. And the conservation just felt most comfortable in terms of the protection of the off-site wetlands with the detention pond.
Commissioner Kennelly?
I was just going to ask, you made a comment before Commissioner Parker asked your question about LEED certification perhaps being actually somewhat counterproductive. I just wanted you to explain why seeking LEED would be counterproductive.
Well, I mean, I could talk to the points. In 2007, Connecticut legislation passed a new high-performance requirement that all state facilities meet a new Connecticut high-performance standard. The Connecticut High Performance Standard really essentially meets all the LEED requirements without the documentation, and some of the mandatory requirements in LEED are a little, they're national as opposed to regional, where the Connecticut High Performance is more regional. We tend to use the Connecticut High Performance Manual as our primer for sustainable design. It addresses issues that are pertinent for New England and specifically for Connecticut. So we use that. For example, one of the arguments is that in a LEED certified building, you have to have a white roof. The roof has to be white. And there's arguments that say in New England, we actually have more cooling days than heating days. So in that case, it actually makes it cost us more money to put a white roof on a building. So in that way, it's almost, for us to meet LEED certification, we have to build a building that's less energy efficient. Yeah, so there's a couple other examples like that I could tell about.
Are there costs associated with seeking LEED certification?
It's minimal.
So it's not that.
It's around 8 cents per square foot.
Right.
Thank you, Mr.
All right,
Stone.
sure thing.
Thank you, David. As I said before, Tara Vincenta is a principal and founder of Artemis Landscape Architects. She's a award-winning landscape architect. Got her bachelor's degree in landscape architecture with honors from the State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and a Bachelor of Science from Syracuse University. She's received numerous awards, as you'll see in her resume that I'm going to hand out for both your purposes and the record, including 3 recent awards of merit from the Connecticut chapter
of the American Society of Landscape Architects, and she's a council member of CLARB, which is the Council of Landscape Architectural Registration Board, and she's certified as a licensed landscape architect in Connecticut, New York, and California. And we chose Tara because of her creativity with regard to creating something here on a site that really is not very aesthetically beneficial to the area now, and coming up with something that would be, and something that St. Vincent's could be proud of, and we hope you agree that she's done that. We've also put her on the spot because she'll respond to some of the questions or the considerations that were raised a few months ago in terms of additional strategies for landscaping that could be done to soften the parking lot area. And I would want to present a copy to everyone of her biography, which is somewhere right here. And while I'm doing that, rather than holding Tara up, I'll let Tara come forward. We do also have, again, for you, copies of everything she'll be referring to that are mounted on the board, and I will pass those down. Excuse me. Get out of your way.
Thank you very much. For the record, I am Tara Vincenta, principal and founder of Artemis Landscape Architects. I'm a licensed landscape architect with Artemis Landscape Architects in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In designing the landscape for St. Vincent's, our overall concept was really to create a landscape that fit contextually into the neighborhood within, as others have been talking about, this transitional and residential feel, and also really to embrace the theme of a vernacular Connecticut landscape. So as a landscape architect, that was very important for me to be able to kind of capture that feeling. And we've done this by incorporating elements that you can see on the plan that I've provided to you. I don't know if you want me to use the pointer or I can just point right to the plan, but rebuilding what is right now completely covered with vines and overgrowth along the road here. To introduce this whole project is this idea of a natural, native Connecticut landscape, incorporating a low stone wall, which we find on many properties in Connecticut and in very much in residential neighborhoods, as well as the idea of using a meadow behind that and an orchard of flowering trees along here to create that very bucolic kind of feeling that we expect in this Fairfield neighborhood. Right now, the area outside or along the street, I'm sure many of you have driven past there, is quite overgrown. And so I think that by clearing this area of all the derelict vines and dead trees, because pretty much that's all that is existing there right now. If you go there, there's a lot of really dead wood with a lot of old vines growing there, and probably just an incredible infestation of poison ivy. So we're going to clean up and dress up the whole front entrance here so that it really will read as a gateway with a great, I think, natural Connecticut feel. As others have discussed, the entry courtyard is designed to be small and residential in feel and scale. Not only are we going to be using porous pavement, as has been discussed at length here, but also we're going to be introducing, some permeable pavers in this area to signify the entrance to the courtyard, or to the front door. And that's something that I will often employ in a residential landscape plan also on a driveway area, kind of to, it just makes a statement about where the front door is in a very beautiful and quiet way. In addition
I think that, as it's already been discussed, this would minimize traffic at the front of the building. And we have an island there that would be planted with some beautiful flowering trees, and the surrounding plantings, as you'll see on all of the property, what we've tried to do is select plant materials that are mostly native, low water requirements, and sustainable, and low maintenance. And I think that that's a very important feature in any landscape plan these days, and we try to incorporate that aspect in everything we do, and particularly on a property like this where we would want to make sure that that it maintains a beautiful and appealing appearance with a lot of variety in terms of the seasonal bloom and interest. And a lot of the plant materials that you will see on your sheet here that are surrounding the plan. You can see that we've provided leaders to each of the areas, so you can kind of get a sense for what we're suggesting for the various areas and how those would help to enhance the property. So rather than just having a list of plants or a lot of photographs of plants, you can begin to see how they integrate into the landscape and how they're appropriate for where we've placed them.
Commissioner Barrett has a question, if he can interrupt.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I see all the plantings. The concern I have is with the shade trees or lack thereof. Our regulations call for a shade tree in the parking lot for every 10 parking spaces. So by my calculation, you need 13, and they're supposed to be equally distributed throughout the parking area. I'm not really seeing 13. I'm seeing lots of landscaping, but the parking lot in the back, I see 8, and they're kind of off to
Okay.
the side.
Yeah.
So
Well, I will talk about that.
this is kind of meant to give, a shady parking option.
Sure.
For-
Well, let me address that. Just in terms of, as Mr. Jobs talked about, the parking lot was designed to accommodate the number of parking spaces for the building. So I addressed this planting plan with regard to that engineered plan. However, we do have options. But these trees along the border, this is also considered part of the parking lot. There's parking spaces along here, and these trees that are located along here are intended to be a bicolor oak is what we've selected here, which is a very drought-tolerant tree. And so we are meeting the minimum requirement if you count the edges.
Yeah, just to interrupt Tara on that, just because we did look at that. That's not to say, and we have some concepts, which you'll get into, that we think we can further address, but just the technical that you raised. We did review that with staff, and as we've done, for example, I keep mentioning Fairfield University, but it was found that we did comply with the requirement of the parking lot shade trees technically relative to this layout in terms of both their number and their disbursement on the property. Now, having said that, Tara will address what I think some of the commissioners' concerns were about the lot at some point in your presentation.
Yes, and I'll talk to that right now, if you like. So right now, as you indicated, there are parking islands that have been provided for within the site plan. And we're providing 2 shade trees on each one of those and plantings below. As you also heard, there's an additional 4 extra spots, so technically we could insert another island in both of these areas in the center, which would certainly help to break things up, and we would still meet the number of parking spaces required. Another low-impact development a technique that is sometimes used is in between those parking spaces would be to create a bioswale in that area, which could also pick up some of the water that's coming off of this, and also provide a green area. And you plant that with plant material that will withstand both drought and wet conditions. And that can be a very attractive feature as well.
You're aware our regulations allow the reduction of spaces by 4.5 feet to accommodate features such as these, correct?
They do?
Yes.
Okay.
Agree with me, yes, they
Yeah,
do. They do.
so I think that would be a really viable solution to.
So if we told you you
To
can,
your
I assume what you're telling us is if you were given this parking lot without the spaces drawn in and told to design it, you clearly wouldn't have designed it looking like this.
Well, I can't say that. I didn't do the engineering, and I understand that there's a lot of water requirements, involved to get it from one end to the other. But I certainly would do everything, that I could, especially based on your observations, to provide a solution to that. Which I would say a bioswale, in between here would be a great thing to do. And I think everybody here is in agreement with that.
Would you be able to take...
We could do some additional trees on additional islands.
What I'm getting at,
Right.
would you be able to create islands if we told you the regulations allowed you, for instance, to
Sure.
reduce parking spaces by 4.5 feet in length to accommodate tree planting, provided that no more than 2 spaces per each tree should be so reduced? So would you be able to take those kind
No
of
problem.
parameters and put more tree islands in this parking lot?
Absolutely.
And how would you, this bioswale, would you use it to come straight along, right through here?
Yes,
Right through here?
in these areas here.
And would that be a planted swale of some, actually, we have to speak with
Well,
Mr.
the
Jobst
engineer
about his
might have
drainage
some
issues.
comments. Walter might have some comments regarding the substrate here, so.
For the record, Walt Jobst again. The bioswale, I think we can address your concerns by, as Tara said, putting in another island, taking up 2 spaces, taking up 2 more spaces, have 2 islands in the center, we'd get another 4 trees. We'd still meet the parking requirements. We could, and then, as you suggested, a little square, maybe between the islands halfway, reduce those parking spaces so we can get a square, get another tree in there, still maintain that parking. Problem, although a bioswale, I have used them in the past, due to the width of the property, putting in a bioswale between that would, I think, present problems that are more easily solved by doing what I had just suggested.
What would those problems be?
Well, what you'd end up having to do is create a bumper overhang so that the spaces which are now 9 by 18 would be 9 by 16 with a 2-foot overhang on either side. So now you have a 4-foot width, but your plantings are limited to something that's going to grow under the bumper.
Right.
Because the bumper will intrude on that. With islands, we can put trees in, we can put higher plants, and I think would work just as well, if not better, than, in this instance, putting in a bioswale.
It won't take up any of the drainage.
You can make openings in those islands that will accept drainage, so I think that's.
Well, the site is, the design is such that the drainage should flow
Sheet drain across.
with the islands in without a problem.
Are you proposing depressed islands for these trees, or the more of the traditional style curbed islands with the trees sitting above
They're
the level?
curved
I think we
islands.
anticipated putting, these would be all curved, raised above.
Is the reason you wouldn't make them depressed islands, or depressed islands with curbing that had openings to allow the sheet runoff to go into them?
We could do that. I think the benefit would be very minor by, creating what I would call small little rain gardens.
Like the one they just designed at the golf course, for instance.
Yeah,
There's a lot of talk about why, the lot on, you're familiar with the lot on South Pine Creek?
I'm not familiar
By the
with
par
it, but
3
I
golf course.
understand
There was
what- I
significant
understand what you're
discussion
talking
about a rain
for that.
garden, how they thought that was the best solution. We're very excited to put it in a lot similar size to this, essentially, I think. And that was
Well, we
a very
have
different approach.
The function of the rain garden within our detention basin, recharge basin.
I was going to talk about that in a minute. But I think, Walter makes good points with regard to the site drainage, and maybe while some of these concepts are very popular now, to do a bioswale, to take up some of the water within the planted islands, it also has to have, rather than just to do it for the sake of incorporating that feature, we've done a very large-scale mitigation and rain garden kind of feature, if you will, in the detention basin, using plants that will tolerate wet and dry conditions and create a feature here. So I think if the engineering suggests that it's logical to do it here, and that it would be beneficial to the site, then I would be behind that 100%, and would be able to certainly provide appropriate plant materials, to create those kinds of low-impact development, water resource management, and stormwater management practices. But if the engineering doesn't support it, then I think that it's important to recognize whether it does or it doesn't. But in any case, we can certainly create a much greener parking lot here by adding islands, as you say. And if there is some benefit to being able to have fewer spaces and creating those rain gardens, then that might make sense. But I do understand the constraints, if you see, on the width of the property, that we might not be able to get the width that we need here to do that feature. So that's something I think that we really need to take a look at and make sure that it makes sense. I guess that would be my only.
Just quickly,
Commissioner Kennelly.
you described the sliver of land, I think, to the eastern part of the property as an orchard or meadow. About approximately how many square feet of the 105,000 square feet is that triangular sliver with the meadow area and so forth? And down here, I mean, those two together, what would that be about in total square footage? Those two green areas there, and then and then below. About how many square feet does that encompass, would you guess? If you knew, I bet it's just things you would know off the top.
Off the top of my head.
No.
Yeah.
No.
We can give you a better idea by scaling it off.
Yeah.
This is about 2,200 square feet. This is roughly 65, let's say on the average 40, so that's another 2,400, 5,000.
So about 5,000 of the 105. Okay.
Right. And also trying to use plantings also that are more deer resistant in areas, like I said, in native. One thing that we really looked at too was providing screening along the edges of the property and using plant material that the deer don't eat, so that those again would be sustainable, and also to provide a really nice green buffer for the neighboring properties. Also we kind of got lost in this parking lot discussion, but what we're also proposing for this area over here is something very residential in scale, utilizing a pergola, an outdoor patio and garden area over here, again, that staff could use and patrons of the building as well. And I think that especially, in looking at the facade, the beautiful facade that the architect presented, that this would just complement that. And again, we use this in many of our residential projects, and I think that it fits the Connecticut vernacular and would be a very beautiful garden feature here, adjacent to the main entrance, which is at the rear of the property here.
Ms. Vincenta, how are you proposing to water, if you are proposing to water, the parking lot trees or this pergola area or the orchard in the front? Or is this a sustainable based upon the normal rain?
It wouldn't be absolutely without irrigation completely, but it would have minimal irrigation, and there would be areas, I would imagine, where we would use a drip irrigation system. You know, that hasn't been designed at this point, but that would be have low water requirement. In fact, some of the plantings...
The point is, we don't want to design a parking lot that we see too often where the trees may not survive, because you can't plant a tree in asphalt and expect it to grow. It needs roots, it needs water, as you know.
And that's very much the reason why I was recommending the bicolor oak, because it is very drought tolerant. All along this edge, we're suggesting a native grass called panicum, which is a switchgrass. Again, will grow with very minimal water requirements. And then alternatively, in this detention basin down here, we're actually creating a beautiful feature here. You can see that we've done a cross-section through that you would be viewing if you were viewing it from the back end of the property, to mitigate, again, the height of the retaining wall there, which, quite frankly, I don't believe anyone would really be able to see with the extent of the wooded area here, but just in case in winter when there's no leaves on the trees, we have provided for an evergreen buffer. And then within that area, what we're using in this area would be plantings that would be sustainable in wet conditions or dry conditions, such as iris versicolor, cardinal flower, cattails, andropogon. We're talking about using red and yellow twig dogwood, and then when we get up into the drier areas, up at the edges of the parking lot, we have bayberry and inkberry. So this area here, I think, would translate into something that would be, you know, a very beautiful overlook, even for people in the parking area. Not only, and also providing a beautiful buffer, you know, from any direction, you know, that neighbors of the adjoining properties. I think that about covers it. If anyone has any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Vicente.
You're welcome. Just to summarize, I think, where we are on the landscaping plan, based upon the provisions of the regulations, which the Chair pointed out, the fact that we do have an excess of 4 spaces and still would be compliant, we'd be very comfortable with a condition of approval that would, you know, require us to present to you through the staff a revised landscaping plan for the parking lot that would include the provisions for additional islands in the parking area that would break up that lot. And although this may technically comply with the regulations, it'd be more in compliance with the spirit of the regulation. One thing I'd like to show you before I have Mike Kneff come, if you turn to your, I think this is the second to last in your package, but it's up here now. This is the slide I was talking about before, and before we leave the site and start talking about the use of the building and the traffic analysis, okay? Here's our building. This is the first house on Weeping Willow. The site, the line from our property line to that first house right here is 300 feet. And then our building sits 375 feet from our property line. So there's a distance of 675 feet from our building to that first house on Weeping Willow. What this also shows you is the sight line, based upon the topography as represented in the plans. It also shows the existing, as Tara referred to it, the existing tree vegetation there. And it's offered to you both to demonstrate, we hope, that all of these factors taken into consideration, the distances, the topography, the elevations, all would render this building and the retaining wall that's been referred to as well as not having any adverse impact visually on our nearest residential neighbors. Again, we have no abutting residential neighbors, but we certainly have residential neighbors in the area, and we took particular care with this site section to ensure that there wouldn't be any impact visually on those neighbors. And I think the document, I hope, speaks for itself. I think there will not be. I'd like to call on Mike Caniff at this point. As I indicated before, Mike is here to give you an overview of, with more specificity than I did, how St. Vincent's is going to use this building.
Hold on 1 second. The tape. You have to change the tape.
Oh, sure.
Thank you. All set, Mr. Cannon.
Good evening. My name is Michael Caniff, for the record. I am the Director of Real Estate and Facility Development for St. Vincent's Medical Center and our Health Services Corporation. First of all, I'd like to very much thank you for having this special meeting, particularly and specifically for this project. We appreciate your time and schedule adjustments tonight. The first thing I'd really like to tell you is this is not a hospital. We have a hospital in Bridgeport. Prior applications and such refer to this property and project as applications. I don't want there to be any misnomer that this property that we're talking about here has anything to do with a hospital. What this project is referring to is a medical office building, a traditional medical office building. As some of the commissioners had mentioned, the question is the opportunity for an endoscopy suite or some type of multifunctional lab be in the suite, be in the building, or radiology services. Those are not our intentions. Our intentions are to develop a highly efficient, highly functional cardiovascular medicine service line in this building. We have cardiovascular services both internally as medical center, as a medical center corporation, in areas all throughout Fairfield County, including Fairfield, Trumbull, Norwalk, Stamford, and so on. The intentions of this property are to not only have direct St. Vincent's owned entities, which are medical physician offices, and independent community-based physicians be part of this facility. As some of you may know, with the changes in healthcare that are on the news each and every night, there are a lot of significant changes to each of the local providers. Some of those require the providers to seek opportunities for employment, joint venture, ownership, or investment stake with some of the large institutions, and we have been doing that over the last few years. As part of that, some of the independent physician entities end up becoming part of St. Vincent's Medical Center itself.
That's one of my questions. You know, there was a conversation earlier regarding the pilot funds in lieu of property taxes for this building, and I see a trend professionally in doctors becoming employees of hospitals around the state purchasing practices, and the doctors become direct employees. Should that occur the next few years, the next decade on this property, could you not then come back, claim tax-exempt status for this building because all the people in the building are St. Vincent's employees? It's a St. Vincent's building. They're providing medical services, and the town would get no tax money from this?
Sure. I honestly couldn't answer that in 10 years from now. I think 10 years ago, the state of healthcare was in as much flux as it is right now, 15 years ago, or HMOs were changing and so on. So we honestly can't answer that. One of the challenges in healthcare right now is predicting what's going to happen in a year, never mind 5. So to be honest with you, the best minds in our parent company nationally probably couldn't even answer that question. And in the matter of taxes, though, there's a lot of variability, and I'm certainly not a tax expert. My background is engineering, but I'm certainly not a tax expert, but there requires a certain portion of the ownership a large portion of the ownership be in a direct not-for-profit use, and some portions of it not being that would consider the entire property to be not-for-profit, to be for-profit.
Is your hospital in Bridgeport all not-for-profit and exempt from
Yes.
property taxes because of pilot program? Or subject to the pilot program, I should say?
The entire building is not, the entire campus is not. We do pay taxes. I'll give you an example. We do own a medical office building in Bridgeport That building is fully taxable and has been ever since we owned it. There is a large portion of that building that right now is being utilized by direct nonprofit St. Vincent's entities. However, a portion of that building is being leased to private physicians, and that building is taxable. So
The
that's-
entire building or just the portion that's
Nope,
leased?
the entire building. The entire building.
Is that because you can only claim the status, the tax exempt status, once a certain percentage becomes not-for-profit, if you will?
Again, I'm not a tax expert, but based on the analysis that we've done, it would not be 100% likely that we would gain that, nor have we ever asked for that. Our intentions are, if we're renting it out to the community, that we're paying our taxes. We're paying our taxes on the property. So our intention right now is that this will be a tax-bearing property.
Commissioner Jacobs, Commissioner Connelly?
Since you're telling us that it's going to be mostly involved in cardiovascular doctors and physicians, are you going to be doing any things like, I'm assuming you'll be doing stress tests, echo stresses?
Sure.
Will you be doing electrocardial conversions? Will you be doing catheterizations?
No.
No catheterizations, but...
All those services you mentioned need to be done in the ECTs don't necessarily need to be done, the electrocardial conversions. The caths need to be done in a medical center, so that would not be possible.
But you will be doing like the echo stresses there?
We will absolutely be doing echo stresses. That is a primary outpatient function for cardiovascular medicine. We also could be doing what is considered nuclear tests. Some of you may have heard of those, nuclear stress tests, which you're on a machine that's very low dose radiation and generates an image of your heart using an isotope through your bloodstream. That would be done. I don't know if there's any other particular questions. Other services related to cardiovascular medicine are rehabilitation. Folks that have perhaps some type of invasive heart intervention, for instance, a cath procedure or open heart surgery, require cardiac rehabilitation services over time. There is an opportunity to do those in this facility. Those have to be supervised by a licensed cardiologist, so that is a possible opportunity. Cardiovascular medicine is changing rapidly over time, and imaging is getting much better. That's the reason why heart attack survival is going up in the area as well. I'd like to reference
Commissioner Connelly had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up something I asked earlier, maybe you were getting to this. The composition of your practice, where are these doctors going to be coming from? Are they Fairfield doctors? Are they doctors from Trumbull or other Norwalk? Where will they be coming from to work in this facility?
All of the above, to be honest with you. There is an opportunity to bring cardiac specialists from other regions of the state, for instance, down in Stamford, in Norwalk, to come to this area. Some that have specialists. For instance, electrophysiologists are not a very common subspecialist in the area. We have some, but there are more in some other areas. To bring them here to see patients on a sort of semi-regular basis is an opportunity. I could list off Trumbull, Fairfield, Bridgeport.
Well, I guess what I'm asking you broadly is,
Entire
I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I guess what I'm asking you broadly is are physicians already in Fairfield primarily going to be, you mentioned in the sheet we were provided that there'll be 50 to 75 permanent jobs could be created as part of this development.
Right.
What I'm trying to understand are what are those jobs? If this is going to be a facility where, say, already 35 or 40 doctors from Fairfield are going to, that seems like I don't know if that's a really high number, but if they're already going to come over and work here now as opposed to being scattered throughout the town, I don't know if those are created. How do you get that jobs created number? And again, do you have any sense at all of even broadly about what percentage of your doctors might, or medical professionals might be coming from the town of Fairfield?
Sure. First of all, in cardiovascular medicine, with St. Vincent's affiliated physicians, cardiologists represent a very, very small element of Fairfield, tiny, probably 1,500 square feet, so that's very small. In the greater region represents a much larger figure than that. So there would be a net influx to Fairfield, some of which may be alleviated or relieved in Trumbull or Bridgeport or Norwalk. So for instance, if we brought 20 jobs to Fairfield, perhaps 15 of them have come from Trumbull. That could be a likely scenario.
When you say jobs, is this the support professionals who work with the doctors, or the... Both.
Yeah, both. Physicians come with a very large contingent of support staff, nurses, techs, billing clerks, receptionists, and so on. Each of them carry a good 6 or 7 staff members, depending on their subspecialty. So they bring a lot of folks with them. We have a large history of recruitment in the area for subspecialists. Those are familiar with our liver and pancreatic cancer growth and expansion at the hospital, as well as our non-invasive and minimally invasive cardiac surgery programs. We've recruited a large amount of surgeons from the Newark area, as well as some of the large institutional players in the country. So we've done a good job at bringing those folks here. Those are folks that would be in this building.
Let me explain where I'm going with this, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question or Mr. Fallon wants to jump in, but what I guess I'm saying to you is that when I look at this, one of the issues beyond the technical aspects of the building, everything else, is we're going to have to make a choice about whether this is appropriate for the environment in which it sits. So one of my concerns would just be that, again, I'm going to be adding to the influx of vehicles that are going to be coming in here to man this facility during time of day that I'm in this traffic every day at this, when these offices open up, I'm there. And tonight, when I was rushing to get here, I was caught up in Fairfield's insignificant traffic delays again and again. It was quite frustrating for all the insignificance. I found myself struggling to get here by 7 o'clock after getting off the train. So I guess what I'm saying to you is that's what I'm concerned about. If you're taking, if physicians and employees who support physicians are already working in practices in Fairfield and maybe they're going to be congregated here and this is going to take them off local roads, great. But what it sounds like is that this sounds like these are going to be specialists and their support staff who will be coming from other communities who are now going to be on the Merritt and getting off the Merritt in an improved circle, but still in this community. These are more folks who are going to be there at 7:30, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock, and maybe Saturdays, but that probably won't matter very much. But so that's what I'm trying to understand, who these people are.
Sure, and I think, first of all, following me in the presentation, and I wanted to answer the balance of your questions that you've already asked that I haven't had an opportunity to answer yet, but there are going to be a net out of folks working in this building from outside of Fairfield. That's true. But I'd like to have Mr. Galante handle the traffic questions. He has a very detailed presentation for you tonight.
Okay.
One of the questions...
Commissioner Parker had a question.
Okay, excuse me.
Well, I'm assuming from what you've been saying that this will function very much like other cardiology practices, and the doctors will rotate between different facilities, like they'll spend one day at
That's very...
Fairfield
Yes.
and Tuesday.
Right. Yes, that's a common practice now in medicine.
And then the Trumbull folks would be here on the Tuesday and at the same time, so, I see.
Some of the questions you had already asked, the commissioners have already asked, is medical waste. That is not allowed. That's illegal, actually, to go into the main waste stream, as is any type of radiological waste. So that's a clear answer. You've asked about the green features of the building, as David had mentioned, but one of the primary benefits of green features in a building is actually controlling it, turning the lights off and turning the air conditioning off, and controlling those features when it's occupied and non-occupied. Those are some of our primary elements that we introduce to all of our properties. Lastly, I'd like to emphasize the fact is that we've spent a lot of time engaging the neighborhood in the area in an attempt to make sure this property limits or prevents any adverse impact in the area. I'm sure most of you know the history of St. Vincent and know that we're a good neighbor. We've been in this community for over 100 years, and we intend to be here. We intend to have the parking lot filled with beautiful trees for the life of the building, not just when the zoning officials are coming through and checking it. We're here to be here for life, so that's our intention. Does anyone else have any other questions before Mr. Galante handles the traffic concerns?
Thank you. Mr. Kenneth.
As I said in introducing Mr. Galante, he has submitted a traffic analysis and impact assessment. He's going to summarize that, answer any questions. Obviously, a central focus, no pun intended, of the traffic presentation is the improvements that we're making in the area to the circle. I say we, but that's something that's already sort of written in stone because you've seen that before. It, as I said, was reviewed as part of the Sacred Heart application a few months ago. And with that as just a general background, I'll introduce Mr. Galante.
Mr. Galante, before we begin your presentation, as excited as we all are, we're going to stand in a 5-minute recess. We'll be back.
Should I stay? It's the anticipation.
Your call. We're back in session. Mr. Galante.
Good evening. Mike Galante, Principal of Frederick Clark Associates. We have offices here in Fairfield, and we prepared the traffic study for St. Vincent's Medical Center for this medical building on Park Avenue. And I'd like to summarize in under 45 or 50 minutes. No, only kidding. The traffic study, and I have PowerPoint slides that are behind you. And the slides are really the same information that's in the report itself. And I'll just run through them. I'll try to do it quickly in the interest of time. And I'll be ready to answer any questions you may have during or after. The traffic study was prepared and dated March 12th of this year, March of 2012 of this year. And it goes through a process, and I'll just run through these steps. Wrote an inventory, data traffic collection, other developments in the area, and I'll talk about that. Certainly site traffic generation for the proposed 25,000 square foot building, the site traffic distribution and assignment. Mike, next. The 2011 future traffic volumes, accident analysis, recommended road improvements, which I'll touch on certainly in some detail. Anticipated road improvements by others, and then I'll just get into it. That's just a summary of the steps we'll go through tonight. Mike. The study area, and this is a reference, it's actually figure 2 in the report itself. That's the figure number up there in the top right. Just to give you a reference, Merritt Parkway, State Route 15, Park Avenue, a road shared by Fairfield, Bridgeport, and Trumbull, and Easton to some extent. Interchange 47, which is on the move right here, and the site itself right here opposite the existing roundabout or traffic circle and the northbound ramps for the parkway itself. These arrows just represent the lanes, turn movement configuration, traffic control, and so on. We included the entire interchange 47, both southbound and northbound ramps in our study. We looked at and included the Jefferson Street, Old Town Road, Park Avenue intersection with the traffic signal. We included the driveway to Sacred Heart's main campus, mainly because, one, we have volumes in the information, but this traffic signal is coordinated with this traffic signal. They work together. So we analyze those as one. I'll run through these fairly quickly, but we collected data for the weekday morning, weekday afternoon, and Saturday in case the facility might be open. We're not sure if it will be, but we did an analysis for a Saturday condition. The peak, the time volumes and the time periods, the morning peak was 8 to 9 a.m. The afternoon peak, don't change the figure, Mike, actually ran between 4 and 6 p.m. over a 2-hour period. And I say that because depending on the location, we had volumes for different time periods within the 2-hour period. And then on Saturday, the peak was 11 a.m. to 12 noon. This figure is figure 3 from the report. It simply shows the peak hour volumes for the 8 to 9 a.m. time period in the morning. Just for reference purposes, Park Avenue south of the interchange, both AM and PM carries about 1,300 vehicles. The morning actually has the higher of the two volumes. On Saturday, that volume there, and these are 1-hour, two-way volumes for peak conditions.
I noticed this was conducted March 17th, 2011. Was Sacred Heart in session, or was that a spring break?
No, they were in session, absolutely.
Thank you.
And if I, yes?
Just a follow-up question. I was going to ask, not about whether they were in session, but I also noticed the date on this too. This is like over a year ago. And I know you do the no build and then the build conditions, but that seems like a while ago for this particular application. Is there any reason why it was conducted so far ago? And has anything changed in the meantime in the last 16 months or so?
Yes, and I'll touch on that actually. But should I answer your question?
Well, yeah, I think you can do it together. I mean, we obviously have dealt with the new buildings for Sacred.
Yes, and I'm going to touch on that also. Oh, absolutely. The volumes from March 2011, is really Sacred Heart data. If we were to go out and count again today, and I know someone else did, the volumes have gone down. So this economy is still affecting traffic volume, and you can drive on many of these roads, and I know someone will say there are significant delays out there, but the volumes have dropped. They really have. And I don't have the volumes from the recent counts by another traffic engineer, but he did tell me the volumes have gone down on Park Avenue. He actually said he prefers to use his volumes in his study, not in Fairfield, but across the street. Because my volumes are higher, he's using his own volumes. So these volumes that are a year and a few months old, if you will, are higher.
Okay.
So that, to answer you, and thank you for asking the question, because I was going to get to that, actually. To answer your question, and I'll get to it in the presentation, but we've accounted for all the other developments, certainly Sacred Heart University. We are the consultants, as you know, for that. That's all included in this. The Sacred Heart report included this St. Vincent's building in that study.
And for the record, we're talking about it's the new Sacred Heart building on the corner of Jefferson and Park Avenue,
Yes.
not the chapel or the student center, but that new business Welch building.
Yeah, the Welch.
Yes, and I'll get to that in a minute. I won't touch on it
I
now.
think that presentation, you talked about the potential building at this site, if I recall, correct?
Yes, I did. And it's included in the analysis, and the improvements on Park Avenue, and we'll get to that slide eventually, as far as the improvements that Sacred Heart will incorporate on Park Avenue, as far as the restriping and the straightening out of curbs and creating 4 lanes. If you approved if you approve that plan, this roundabout, if you will, at the existing traffic circle included the St. Vincent's driveway in that plan. So it's very consistent. The volumes for this building were in that traffic study, and this traffic study includes the Sacred Heart building traffic volumes also. And I'll touch on that a little bit as I go through the process. So we're very consistent with, one, the road improvements that you already approved, which is the roundabout, and I'll call it the modification of the existing traffic circle to a modern roundabout, and the road improvements, restriping, signing, traffic signal improvements at Jefferson Street, which is really part of the Sacred Heart approval. Now, as far as who touches on, who provides their roundabout improvement, it could be Sacred Heart, it could be St. Vincent's, it could be a development across the street on the Trumbull side. It's quite frankly who gets there first. Sacred Heart, of course, we're involved with. We need to go through the entire STC, the State Traffic Commission process. This development is not considered a major generator by the state of Connecticut, so we don't have an STC process, but we do have a letter from the Connecticut Department of Transportation, the district office, as far as their review of the traffic circle roundabout, which they're just simply saying design it to their standards. They're pretty much saying the roundabouts are appropriate traffic control, which is there, make it a standard roundabout, and we'll get into that also. But everyone's kind of using the same roundabout. You've already approved this roundabout as far as Sacred Heart, as well as the improvements on Park Avenue and the improvements to the traffic signal at Jefferson Street itself. So I think we're very consistent. We certainly try to be. And I think just to go back to the volumes from March of 11, they're higher than today's volumes. Today meaning when schools were still open this past spring. And the volumes are certainly when the schools were open in the area. And I'll touch on the Sacred Heart as far as how we accounted for that in this study. Okay? Mike, you just go. This figure is just simply the afternoon peak hour as far as the volumes for each of the intersections. The next one is simply the Saturday volumes, and I'll call it base condition or existing conditions for each of the intersections along Park Avenue that we analyzed. This is a summary of the volumes, and I touched on Park Avenue has around 1,300 vehicles AM weekday afternoon, and Saturday slightly lower, about 1,000 vehicles. The ramps for the Parkway, the northbound ramps, which are at the roundabout, about 500 vehicles per hour during each of the peak hours. Next. Other developments, very important, and especially in this area when there were a lot of things going on. We certainly included the medical building across the street in Trumbull on Park Avenue to south of the interchange. We included the continuing increase in enrollment at the Discovery Magnet School on Park Avenue on the Bridgeport side. And we certainly included the Ludlow expansion, the nursing home expansion that's been ongoing. And then, of course, we included the Sacred Heart School of Business and School of Education. Now, keep in mind with Sacred Heart, the business school traffic is already there. Today, it's at the main campus. That traffic is simply shifting to a new building on the corner of Jefferson and Park Avenue. So those volumes are accounted for in the actual traffic counts. The School of Education is certainly new. They're coming from Trumbull, from a different campus, if you will. That traffic for that school is actually at night. It's the teachers coming in for their master's program, to be very simple about it. So their traffic, while it's coming the afternoon peak hour, is very low. The peak traffic for the School of Education is really 7 o'clock at night when this facility is closed. So while we're including all of this traffic, there are different peaks, and that, to a traffic engineer, that's the beauty of, different patterns, different lane use, different activities on the same road. But we account for all different uses on the property in the study area along Park Avenue in this traffic study. And again, it's consistent with the other study that I did, which is for Sacred Heart. And this graphic, which is figure 13 in the report itself, just summarizes that traffic for those different uses that we've added into the system. This development, 25,000 square foot medical building for doctors affiliated with St. Vincent's Medical Center. We treat it as a medical professional building, and using standards provided by ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers, it will generate, and we base this on square footage, and we know doctors will maybe in their office on one day, maybe not there the next day, so you have some vacant office space on certain days without patients, just staff. That's accounted for in these studies that were prepared by ITE, which is really data provided by traffic engineers, and it's pretty much across the board, and this is a requirement from DOT as far as what we use. This building, 25,000 square feet, this is table 6 in the report, will generate 93 trips in the morning. That's 61 vehicles entering the property, 32 vehicles exiting. Weekday afternoon, 111 trips, that's the highest, with 44 in, 67 trips out. Saturday, if we're open, 52 trips in, 39 trips out, for a total of 91 vehicles. That's for each of the 3 peak hours we've analyzed, so it's a 1 hour volume in each case. Next step is, where is this traffic coming from and going to? And it's based on a couple things. Certainly the traffic patterns out there in the Merritt Parkway, Park Avenue, Jefferson Street, Old Town Road during different peaks, our understanding of the area, where we think our activity is coming from. We analyze the peak hours, so in the morning, 8 to 9, we're certainly accounting for staff coming in and patients. Weekday afternoon, 5 to 6, we're accounting for staff and patients leaving or coming in. Saturday, it's a combination of mostly patients and some staff going in and out. Since we look at 11 a.m. to noon time, if a facility is open, many times they're closed by noon on a Saturday. So we're looking at the peak volume on the roads and the peak activity at the medical building itself. And that traffic is added to the roadway system. Generally speaking, we estimate about 35% of the site traffic is coming from the parkway itself. The bold arrows, 20% coming from the east, right there, coming, let's say, from Trumbull. 50% coming from, let's say, Black Rock Turnpike, Westport direction. 35% coming up Park Avenue from Bridgeport, Fairfield. 10% on Jefferson, and 5% coming from Old Town Road. Obviously, this is weighed on what patients may be going to the medical center, which is certainly in Bridgeport on Park Avenue, or Main Street. So we analyzed these distribution patterns. We applied the traffic, the 93 trips, the 111 trips, and so on, to these distribution patterns. The numbers in brackets and no brackets show the turn and movement percentages by location. We apply that traffic to this figure. We go to the next figure. And this shows the assignment of that traffic. In this case, I'm just showing the weekday morning peak as far as the graphic, just for representation of how we do this. Next slide. I'll get to accidents in a second, but we go through the no build, which is the other developments, the base volumes. We increase that with a growth rate to account for general growth, which is certainly not occurring at this point, but we never put negative numbers in there. We put that on top of the existing traffic, come up with build traffic volume for each intersection, each turn and movement. We analyze that, and I'll touch on the analysis after touch on accident experience. This is a table from the report, Table 2. Briefly, the accident analysis for the intersection of the Merritt Parkway, let's call it the southbound ramps, the T intersection. There were a total of 5 accidents for a 3-year period, in this case from 2006 through the end of 2008. And there's 1 accident at the existing roundabout or existing traffic circle. And that goes to my comment that I was going to bring up later on. Roundabouts are a mechanism to reduce congestion, reduce traffic flow as far as traffic calming, and most importantly, to reduce accidents. And this is an example of that as far as a T intersection with stop signs on 2 of the 3 approaches, and a roundabout that, in my mind, is not a standard roundabout or a standard traffic circle because it has a yield sign in the middle of it. We plan on standardizing that roundabout to today's standards. But this is just a summary of the accidents for the study area. This is the roundabout, or the traffic circle that exists today. The site is located on the left side of this picture. The roundabout itself, or I would call it a traffic circle, a lower standard traffic circle, which in my mind is now outdated. It has traffic control in one leg up within the traffic circle, which is no longer standard. If you go out there, there's some overgrown vegetation, there's some site restrictions out there, and it functions and it moves traffic quite well. Next slide, Mike. This is a schematic only. Don't take this as a design by any means, but the actual engineering plan is on the site plan. This is a schematic that you've seen before as part of the Sacred Heart approval process that you've signed off on, but this brings it to a standard roundabout as far as radii. It's a one-lane roundabout, introduces the fourth leg, if you will, which is the driveway to the medical building on the west side, and it standardizes the approaches to the roundabout from Park Avenue and the Parkway itself. There were comments from the regional agency as far as it might be a little confusing. It's a standard roundabout. It's something the state's doing in many places throughout the area, and this is something that they're considering at other ramps from the Parkway, actually. And the state's been behind this roundabout location before we came on board as far as Sacred Heart or even this medical building itself. This is the anticipated improvements by others in addition to the roundabout, which is just off the map right there, but these are the improvements I mentioned before by Sacred Heart, which would be the restriping and creating a four-lane cross-section, if you will, from Jefferson Street up to the interchange with the Parkway, the upgrading of the existing traffic signal at Jefferson Street, introduction of crosswalks and a pedestrian phase to the traffic signal, which was certainly some discussion last time around. That will be done as part of the Sacred Heart improvements. Yes, sir.
Speaking of crosswalks, if I remember correctly, the college will be putting in that building a sidewalk. Will you be somehow having a sidewalk, and will Notre Dame be doing a sidewalk in between it so that you have walkability from the college to your new facility so that students can actually get treated by doctors?
Okay. I can answer part of that question. As part of Sacred Heart, yes, there's certainly a sidewalk along their entire frontage, along with new curbs and the conformity, if you will, of that edge of the pavement on Park Avenue. I can't speak for, but I know there's no sidewalk currently proposed along the ball fields for the high school, currently. At the driveway to our site, I know we talked about a sidewalk at our frontage, but our frontage is actually quite small. I don't believe it's shown on the plan right now, but that's certainly something we can consider. But it's a sidewalk to nowhere at the moment. But looking to the future and the benefit of sidewalks, and I would agree with you, up and down Park Avenue, there are certainly sidewalks from, well, certainly from Jefferson Street down quite a distance. Sacred Heart's doing the section along their new building. I can't speak for the high school at this point as far as the sidewalk, but...
Commissioner Parker?
You have the public transportation at Old Town Road.
Yes.
And that's where the buses would dispense
Today.
people
Yes.
today.
Yes.
And I assume there will be sidewalk that would take them up to your facility.
Well, we can't speak for a sidewalk in front of the high school, ball fields at this point in time. It's somebody else's property. So,
We're not opposed to the concept of a sidewalk on our frontage as a further incentive, and who knows when you may see the high school at some point.
and the answer is, we do have a sidewalk on our plan on our frontage.
On your frontage,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because I know we did talk about that.
Are you opposed to continuing your sidewalk down to the Sacred Heart property in front of the high school?
Yeah.
He said no.
Yeah, I didn't know I have the right to do it. But I would say to you that I think with Sacred Heart's plans, with our commitment to the sidewalk, and with the fact that at some point in time, you'll have the opportunity to probably assess the high school property on some basis or another, you probably create that linkage.
Mr. Galante, with this design, I understand the single-lane rotary or roundabout, as you call it.
Yes.
Could while trailer trucks are not allowed on the highway, you can have shorter ones delivering to this building, in theory. Could a tractor-trailer make it around the roundabout if they're coming up Park Avenue and they want to get into the site? Or
It
do they
has
have
to
go
be
on the wrong
designed
side
to
of the
accommodate
roundabout?
buses, school buses, emergency vehicles, and large trucks. The theory and the concept that I said, a single-lane roundabout, and actually, you know what, we have a slide. If you keep going. There you go. If you turn around, this is something that was built by the state. It's actually on the West Haven Milford line along the shore. Purpose of this is, see this area right here? If you turn around, this is actually to accommodate large trucks. That's why it's like that. It's not used every day.
Well, that's what you're drawing in on your
It's
IC,
a single lane roundabout, but the brick treatment or whatever pavement treatment it is specifically for large trucks.
So the fire truck, the hook and ladder truck needs to get around it. We could clearly make that corner
Absolutely.
because of this design. And that's the same thing you're
And
proposing.
it certainly is aesthetically pleasing to do it this way and have landscaping in the middle. And ideally, landscaping in the middle is actually to block your vision through the roundabout. That's one of the reasons why we put landscaping in roundabouts. It's a traffic calming measure. You know to slow down, you don't think you're driving straight through. So there's a reason for landscape, not only aesthetically, but for traffic purposes, traffic safety purposes. And while we're on this one, as I mentioned, traffic's well, they call them roundabouts now, and because the size is much smaller than the traffic circles from New Jersey and Massachusetts from years ago, it's completely different. It's a low-speed traffic control. Traffic is always flowing. You tend to move more traffic. And the big issue and the benefit of roundabouts, and I've been listening to this for quite a while now, is reduction of accidents, which it actually does. And I think the example of our accident data here actually shows that.
Just to ask a quick side question on the West Haven roundabout, is that just a painted asphalt, or is that a different surface of some type? Around the center, that area there?
Oh, I believe that's brick pavers of some type, and a mountable curb all the way around. Yeah.
And we have a number of area towns where we talk about sidewalks, something we started to discuss on a planning perspective. Putting sidewalks in and making them look different visually is kind of a calming and more...
Across the street itself?
Yeah,
as
to
far
make
as
people
different
pay
pavement
attention to
textures?
sidewalks.
Absolutely. And
We've talked about some parking lots. We've incorporated them now, so one entering a lot knows it's a crosswalk. And we're looking at streets as to whether, like some towns are doing now, putting different materials on the crosswalk so you see them clearly when you're coming
Next
in.
time you're up in Georgetown on Route 57, near 107, the state put a crosswalk in, that's exactly what you're talking about.
The state did it on a state road.
Yeah, even though they say they don't do it, they
Right.
did it there. And it actually is, but it's very visible, because the area is not well lit, although it's starting to change. They're doing a lot of improvements now.
So it's not just painted, it's actually a...
It's actual different pavement treatment, yes, and many ways of doing it. But this actually, that's a very good example, next time you're up in that part of the world. Very good example of how to do it.
Thank you.
Okay. If we can go back, Mike, to the... Like that. Go back, go forward. One more. There you go. Thank you. I'm always picked on for saying significant and insignificant, and I certainly respect the comment, all kidding aside. In traffic engineering terminology, I use that phrase to describe impacts to roads and so on. I will also say, and I'm sure I've said it before, any development has an impact. It's how you measure that impact and what the impact is to the roads and how you mitigate that impact. This is part of Table 7 in the report. It's really the last part of it. The charts before and the pages before that talk about a no-build condition, a build condition, and this is really the comparison of the two to show you what the impacts are. And you know that I always try to tell you what the impacts are. And I'll just sum up this chart very simply, and it's really broken down to the two intersections on the Parkway and Park Avenue. The northerly one is the T intersection. 2 stop signs. There's no stop sign on southbound Park Avenue. The reason for no stop sign is the upgrade coming to that stop sign. The state decided a long time ago not to have cars stop on the upgrade. Because of that lack of a traffic control on that approach, which really should be an all-way stop sign control intersection, the results of the analysis show you on the off-ramp, which is a high volume for left turn movements in the morning, 400 vehicles, the afternoon, about 350 vehicles, Saturday, in the 250 vehicle range. It's a high volume movement. We had 12 vehicles in the morning, we had 9 vehicles in the afternoon to that movement. That level of service today is an F, a delay of about, it measures about 2-minute delay in a model. And the reason why it's giving that answer is because it's, and we've talked about this before also, it's assuming that everyone in this room drives exactly the same. I wait for the exact same gap that you wait for. And quite frankly, depending on the type of car you have, you wait for longer gaps and so on. In reality, there is a delay there, but it's not as bad as that model tells us as far as the 129-second delay. We add 14 seconds of delay on that approach by adding 12 vehicles. What happens with the model when you're already at that level of service F condition, by adding just a few cars, it quickly changes the delay or increases it very quickly. In the afternoon, it increases by about 3.5 seconds, but it goes D to E, level service. Now, it changes to D to E because the current level of service there at level of service D is at 34.5 seconds. Its next level of service is 35.1 seconds. So adding just a couple cars, not even 9 cars, will trigger this to go to the next level of service. I don't diminish that delay. That's there, and that's an impact that we have. But in our review from the state, and I'll hand out a letter that we're reviewing with them, they actually don't require us to analyze that intersection at all anymore because it's under 100 vehicles that we're adding to the intersection. If we add 50 vehicles to a turning movement, left turn movement, we have to analyze it. The state's changing all their standards to how we do this. We're providing this traffic study really for the town's purposes and certainly to the state as part of the overall review. They've reviewed the roundabout that we proposed, and it's on the plan, the engineering plan, and they have some minor comments on that as far as the final design of that. But they're accepting the concept of the roundabout, which has been talked about for years, actually, at that location. The letter, and I'll hand it out in a minute, talks about providing a fence along the right-of-way for the Merritt Parkway that was discussed before as far as what is DOT saying about the parkway. They asked for that on every project I work on any limited access highway. We're required to put a chain link fence in, and they're asking for that here. Sometimes they ask for it and it's already there. They just haven't walked through the woods to look for it. And there's some other details to this as far as catch basins, sight lines, and so on, and we're doing that. At the roundabout, if you will, under today's conditions, we call it a lower standard roundabout or traffic circle because it has the yield sign in between, and the circle is not really a circle. We're bringing it up to today's standards as far as a roundabout standard that state is using, actually the whole country is using as far as standards, and it's in the design document that state's now using. And that's what we're doing, and that's what this letter says, and I'll hand it out in a second. I'm not holding back on any secrets.
Commissioner Barrett has a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, you know I love this chart, Mr. Gallant.
I do it for
I
you.
agree with you. I'm glad you pointed out. I mean, sometimes it's really not just a change in level of service. It's really delay in conjunction with that. For instance, at the bottom, you have something going from B to C, but the delay is only 1.3 seconds.
Yeah.
As you said, the other one, it just happens where it is, and the thing which is just a scale, just to have general letters, and as we've also discussed.
And we use it as a guide, obviously.
Yeah, and F to an F is not a change in the level of service, but, you know, delays could go up by minutes, and it's still, you would say, no change in level of service.
In this entire chart, the only 2 locations that there is an impact that, let's call it significant if we want, is in the morning, the left turn coming off the southbound ramp, where it's 400 cars today, we're adding 12.
Yeah.
In the afternoon, we're adding 9, and it's changing level of service. We can consider that a significant delay, or change in delay. Do we change the traffic control at the northbound ramps? We looked at that. We looked at traffic signals. Quite frankly, the state's not interested. They have made no comments about the southbound ramps as far as the traffic control. We considered very seriously in our office adding that stop sign on the southbound coming, let's call it from Easton, coming up the grade. We know the state's going to turn us down because of the grade coming to the intersection. They want the cars to continue moving up the grade through the intersection itself. And in many cases, that's actually the low or the minor approach to the intersection, not the ramp.
Specifically, I mean, Park Avenue, it's at Route 15, the southeast intersection, the one that's gone from A to C and A to D, but I believe you had it something as 0 in the current or no build.
Yeah, and this is the analysis of the current intersection. There's another chart here, and we'll find it in a second. I think it's the next one, Mike. This one here is the new analysis of a roundabout, and you'll see it doesn't give levels of service anymore. It's measuring VC ratio, and basically, for quick reference, 1 is theoretical capacity. You can see the numbers go from 0.25 up to 0.8 overall for the intersection during the morning peak, 0.62 overall, I have 0.8 in the morning, 0.75 in the afternoon, and 0.62 in the Saturday. This is the new way of analyzing a roundabout. We don't deal with levels of service in a roundabout. Don't ask me why, but they decided to do it this way. If I go back to the other chart, you'll see VC ratios in there also, but it also gives levels of service and actual vehicle delay, which is really considered average vehicle delay per approach or lane group. It's lane group when you have a traffic signal, it's approach when you have a stop sign control, so it's a little different terminology. And I know I use significant and insignificant. I've been trying not to use that, as I did in the past, but that's a term that we use, and I have to give that a terminology. And I respect certainly all the comments I've had in the past about that. This is a summary of a lot of numbers and a lot of analyses, but as part of the Sacred Heart approval, you approve the improvements to Park Avenue, the striping, signing, the traffic signal modification, which will be really a replacement at Jefferson Street to incorporate the pedestrian phase, to protect the pedestrians that will be crossing. Crosswalks will be part of that. I know there were some comments about how we treat the crosswalks, and we're certainly looking at that for that project further. At the roundabout, we're providing the same roundabout that everyone's been looking at. You approved that as far as the Sacred Heart approval. I believe on the Trumbull side, they've actually approved a roundabout for the same location, and we're showing the same roundabout as far as the St. Vincent's Medical Building. So we're very, very consistent with what the improvements look like, and certainly the analyses and the volumes from 2011 are consistent with my volumes from Sacred Heart. If we were to go out and count again, the volumes have dropped. And I wish I could give you the percentages, but they wouldn't share that information with me. It's not a public document yet. And I'm done if you're done. And
Yeah, Mr. Galante will remain in attendance, obviously, if somebody has questions.
Thank you.
Is this yours?
Thank you, Mr. Galante.
I think the only thing I want to say about the traffic, Mike just ended with, that we're hopeful that since our building was actually included in a traffic report you received for Sacred Heart University, and that was very specific in terms of these volumes, and that project was unanimously approved, and since the traffic circle that is proposed as part of this application was also part of that application and showed our driveway, that we hope that that will leave us in good stead as you analyze the traffic impacts with regard to this particular facility. It's 25 to 10. The public has been waiting. I think with the chair's permission, I'll save my summary till my last opportunity to speak. I think we should allow members of the public to speak. They've been waiting patiently, and then hopefully I can summarize from the evidence that we provided you tonight the basis for why I think both applications before you should be granted. But at this point, if the chair agrees, I think I'd like to give the public an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Fallon. At this point, we will go to the public. That is all the evidence that's being presented at this time by the applicant. We will go to the public now to see if any member of the public wishes to speak to address any of the evidence. Should there be new evidence coming in at a later point, other than final argument, if you will, the public will have another opportunity. I'm still on that, sir. So I'm going to call you one at a time to come up following this gentleman. Introduce your name and address. And if you have a petition, you can hand it to me, as was just handed to me. So, sir, tell us your name and address, please.
My name is Samuel Boyarsky. I live at 200 Autumn Ridge Road. I've lived there for 45 years, and I'm president of the Stratfield Improvement Association.
And for the record, Mr. Boyarsky, you've given me a number of pages that are a petition of individuals opposed to this application. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Thank you, and we'll accept these for the record, sir.
I won't be on for more than an hour, 10 minutes the most.
I'll pass these to my right, and then Commissioner Parker, if you could take a look, and then we'll pass it back around to the staff. It's heading your way. When you get it, just circulate it back. Go ahead, sir, Mr. Boyarsky.
Number one, I've lived in the area for many, many years, and the traffic problems have changed substantially, particularly when exit 46, 47, and 48. I think that the major factor is the roundabout. The roundabout has caused a lot of problems because there's been a lot of accidents off and on. I've sat on the highway for hours sometimes trying to get off at these various exits. And particularly on Park Avenue, I spent 2.5 hours one afternoon between 3 and 5, and it took an average, and there were almost 3 accidents, by the way, coming northbound. Some of the northbound people would take an absolute left turn instead of going around the roundabout, whatever you want to call it. The other problem is with the excess of traffic that this particular project will give, you're going to have between 50 and 75 more employees. That's wonderful, because that'll bring a lot of economy to town, but it'll also take up a lot of parking spaces, and it'll take a lot of people coming in at various hours. And the hospital is talking about cardiac facilities. I happen to be a cardiac patient, and I know the facilities that they provide, and they're very excellent. However, there can be a lot of things that we don't know about that would go into the medical facility there as it extends. And there's nothing stopping the medical facility from expanding at some future date. And also, the number of accidents were not only noted as of 2008 in the traffic report, and they were limited. But if you check with the police department in Fairfield, they'll tell you, and Bridgeport, there were several accidents in the last few months. I talked to the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and the highway increase in traffic in '08 was 50,000 cars on the Merritt. In 2010, it was 60,000, and this year, they've had a traffic count of 80,000. So there's a substantial increase in traffic, and I don't think those things were taken into consideration in the report. I do feel that it's very important for the safety of individuals living in the area and the exits and egresses. Also, I think there's a value of real estate would be affected substantially if this particular project went into effect. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Boyarsky. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to comment? Sir, just come on up. Good evening.
My name is Tom Gallagher. I live at 335 Weeping Willow Lane. I am the house that's going to be closest to this building on Weeping Willow Lane. And I actually have a written statement that I'm going to read to make it easier for all of us, trust me.
That's fine, sir.
I mentioned my name is Tom Gallagher. My wife and I, Elaine White, and along with our 5 children, are longtime residents of Weeping Willow Lane. Some of you may know me from my years of volunteering in youth sports here in Fairfield. I've coached rec soccer, rec basketball, Little League, National League, Fairfield Nationals, and most recently I spent the last 6 years with the Fairfield Wildcats, where I was president the last 3 years. So suffice it to say that I've served this town very well, I think, in the volunteer efforts with youth sports. And I'm also not going to reiterate or discuss the traffic issues that will result from the change in zoning that is being petitioned here, nor am I here to speak to the fact that this potential building to be built from the change in zoning is very close to wetlands. That's already been addressed. I'm not here to fight the architecture or the look of the building. I would agree the building itself is very nice looking, and in another location, it would be very well received. I've also, I have absolutely no objection to the good things that St. Vincent's has done for the surrounding communities. I'm here to object to the change in zoning, plain and simple, to design commercial. The term NIMBY, or not in my backyard, has often been thrown around as a derogatory term used by sour neighbors to inhibit progress in small and large towns alike. I have no problem saying that I do not want this structure in my backyard. I don't think anybody here at the board would want this in their backyard. Our house is the closest, like I mentioned, to the proposed structure, although we're not the only ones that will be affected by the decrease in property value that I believe will result in the structure if it is to be built. There will be many neighbors that will feel the economic impact of this. When I purchased this property, there was a nice house across from me that I could see, and trust me, I will be able to see the structure from my kitchen window. But the lot behind me was a 2.5-acre lot next to the parkway on one side and the soccer field on the other. Who would have possibly imagined this would even have come up? We have some amazing wildlife that comes through our property and the surrounding properties. So there's hawks and chipmunks and wild turkey, fox, rabbit, deer, you name it. We've got it all that runs through that area there. When I purchased this property, no one even hinted that the lot next door may be changed from a nice little house, it's a 2,500 square foot house that's back there, to a medical building of 25,000 square feet and 129 parking spaces. No one hinted at the time either that my property value would decrease due to economic conditions that were out of our control. But now there is particularly something we can do to stop the decrease in property values that I believe will result. Now, it's the town's responsibility to uphold the rights and trusts of its taxpayers, landowners, families, and neighbors. I do understand it's also the town's responsibility to help to provide services of a commercial nature, schools, hospitals, doctors' offices, etc. I am opposed to this building being constructed where they are trying to construct it, not the construction of this building. I would further point out that this is not, it is not like this is the only location this building could be built. I would venture to guess that there's over 1,000 potential locations, potential properties that this building could be put on without having to change any zoning whatsoever. I ask you to please do the right thing by your neighbors and keep our faith and trust in you, our town officials, and deny this petition. Excuse me.
Thank you,
for
Mr.
your time.
Gallagher. They're over here. They're going this way. Yeah. Sir, come on in.
My name is Doug St. John. I live at 5763 Park Avenue in Fairfield. I've been living there for 10 years. When I bought the property, I had a reasonable expectation that my neighborhood would probably stay the same. I knew the Golf Digest building was there. I didn't know 10, 12 years later that a corporation with religious affiliations would moving into the neighborhood with a power grab to buy a residential piece of property to build a medical facility for an institution that blocks access to women's rights, for reproductive rights, blocks access to health insurance to gay and lesbian couples, as well as building a 25 times the size of my house, 3 doors up from my house, on a piece of property that's slightly larger than twice the size of my property. They talked about a 1-inch or 2-inch rainstorm. Well, that's not even a 3-year storm. We're talking storms now that we have 3 to 6 inches of rain, and they built a facility to capture 1 to 2 inches of rain. We get 6 inches of rain the other day. There's also another piece of property right across the parkway. Beautiful wooded piece of property, just like this one. There's a rear lot and a second piece of property. The person who owns the rear lot has already tried to push through subdividing that rear lot into 2 lots. What's the next thing if they can come into this neighborhood, make a powerful grab of a residential piece of property to profit for themselves, possibly reducing our tax revenues on that piece of property? What's not to stop them from going to the next property next to my house? Again, it's not my neighborhood, not my backyard. I am probably the 3rd or 4th closest person to this property, and this will seriously be detrimental to my property values, and I had a reasonable expectation that I would be protected from situations like this when I purchased my property. Again, my name is Doug St. John, 5763 Park Avenue, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. St. John.
My name is Michael Weinshell. I live at 38 Weeping Willow Lane, and I moved in some 38 years ago this September. I will tell you that the property I moved into and the neighborhood I moved into today is far different than the property I bought 38 years ago. At the time, there was one building, I believe, at Notre Dame, one building at Sacred Heart, and that was basically it. The rest was residential. Since that time, GE has come in, the Jewish Home has come in, the convalescent home, I believe, has come in, and obviously we've seen the expansion of Sacred Heart and Notre Dame, for that matter. And they've all been great neighbors. But I will point out, and it was pointed out, they are institutions, but they all are institutions on residential property. And I think we have to keep that in mind. I am opposed to changing any property within our region to commercial, as it could only open the floodgates to more of the same. And I can think of 3 or 4 other properties quickly that will fit the criteria that there's no real properties next door, and you can change it to commercial. I heard something to the effect that they had a 2008 approval for sewer use on a 25,000 square foot building. Maybe I heard wrong, but I think that was the date mentioned. Who thought about a 25,000 square foot building in 2008? Obviously somebody did, and we all know that there's been numerous proposals for this property as a residential zone. And this board has wisely turned those applications down, and I urge you to do the same in this case. I note that the whole property is designed, I'm told that the landscaping is residential in nature and style. I'm told that the architecture is residential in nature and style. Well, it should be, because the only thing on that property should be residential. I see no new or compelling reason that we need another doctor's office building on that particular site. There was no reason, obviously, that this board felt that way in the past, and I see no new reason why we need this thing. There are many other commercial properties within a 1 or 2 mile distance which they could utilize. So imagine buying your residence and waking up 5 years later and looking out your window and seeing a 25,000 square foot office building with 129 parking spaces. I don't think you would approve that or want it if next to your house or in your neighborhood, and I don't think you should approve this application, and therefore I urge you not to change the zone to commercial.
Thank you, Mr. Weinschel.
My name is Beth Rooney. I live at 85 Weeping Willow Lane in Fairfield. I've been there for over 30 years. 5545 Park Avenue is an essentially rectangular lot consisting of 2.42 acres. It's currently in an R3 residence district, which is primarily for single-family detached residences on lots of at least 20,000 square feet each. This property is surrounded on all sides by properties which are zoned R3 residence, and they are being used for uses which are allowed in R3 resident districts, namely single-family detached homes and a not-for-profit school athletic field with no structures and state purposes, namely the Merritt Parkway. The applicant is requesting a change of zone from Residence District R3 to Design Commercial District. This is a very major change intended to benefit a very small parcel of land, the owners of that land, and the developers of that land. The applicant intends to construct a building which will be occupied by multiple tenants who will be allowed to provide services to customers, clients, or patients on the site. This is not allowed in an R3 zone, nor is it allowed in a designed research zone, which GE is, nor is it allowed in a designed residence zone, which the nursing home, Ludlow, is on. Section 12.4 of the Fairfield zoning regulations describes the purposes and permitted uses in a designed commercial district. It states that the purpose of a designed commercial district is to provide for retail uses as well as business and professional offices. Permitted uses in a designed commercial district include business and professional offices, financial institutions, medical and dental clinics, indoor theater and assembly halls, hotels and motels, retail service stores for cleaning and pressing, including dry cleaning, self-service laundries, restaurants and food services, including catering, drive-through restaurants, package stores for the sale, and establishments for the service of alcoholic beverages, including liquors, beer, ale, or wine. In short, bars. Also, stores and other buildings and structures where goods are sold or services rendered primarily at retail. There are other permitted uses as well. According to Fairfield zoning regulations, a change in use from one permitted use in a designed commercial district to a new permitted use requires only a certificate of zoning compliance. Any new construction, exterior alterations or additions requires a special permit. But as this commission well knows, special permits cannot just be denied just because you don't like the use, if it is a permitted use in the zone. If a change of zone to the designed commercial district is permitted, this commission will be opening a can of worms. It will be opening up the possibility of a variety of undesirable uses being put next to, actually being put within a residential district. A medical office building is an undesirable use in a residential area, and so are hotels, motels, restaurants, bars, laundries, and most of the other uses that are permitted in a designed commercial district. If the zone is changed to designed commercial district, the minimum lot size and other regulations applicable to that district will become applicable to this small 2.42 acre lot. The minimum lot size applicable to lots in a designed commercial district is 10,000 square feet, compared to 20,000 square feet in a residence district R3 zone. The lot coverage of buildings and structures in a designed commercial district can be up to 75% of the lot area, and the total floor area can be up to 150% of the lot area. The maximum lot coverage of buildings and structures in an R3 district is 15% of the lot, and the maximum total floor area is 30% of the lot. Therefore, the lot coverage allowed and the total floor area allowed in a designed commercial district is 5 times greater than that allowed in an R3 residence district. I won't enumerate them, but in addition, the setback requirements from street and adjacent properties are much less in a designed commercial district than they are in an R3 district. The most important thing here is that an R3 residence district is designed primarily for single-family detached residences. The purpose of a designed commercial district is primarily for commercial uses.
Mr. Rooney, 1 second. Mr. Fallon, could you shut the projector off that keeps blinding us up here?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mrs. Rooney. Go ahead. Thank you.
This application is not for a transitional zone change. This small lot is surrounded by R3 residence district in all directions. What would it be transitioning to? Changing the zoning of this small lot would be spot zoning at its worst. It would provide tremendous financial benefits to the owners and developers of this small property, to the financial detriment of all the many residential property owners in the area. This area of Fairfield already suffers from an extreme amount of daily traffic on Park Avenue, Jefferson Street, and Stratfield Road, which is also called Eastern Turnpike, as well as from the Merritt Parkway. It's especially brutal during the commuter hours, but it's also bad on weekends. It cannot bear the imposition of a tremendous amount of additional traffic. The development of a large medical office building in this area and its increase in traffic and congestion will hurt the property values of the residential properties in this area. Paper sticks together. So humid. As you know, Connecticut law requires the Town Plan and Zoning Commission, in making its decision on an amendment to the zoning map, to take into consideration the plan of conservation and development adopted by the Town Planning and Zoning Commission. That's the master plan. Section 2.3.2 of the Town Plan of Conservation and Development, dealing with policies for the Stratfield area of Fairfield, states, some institutional uses have developed in the Jefferson Street area. The General Electric corporate headquarters, convalescent facilities, high school, university, and Fairchild Wheeler Golf Course are naturally bounded, which should prevent overexpansion of these uses. Any future development in this area should be sensitive to the residential uses within this neighborhood, with preference given to residential development and for the golf course open space. Allowing this small lot to become a designed commercial district and the development of a medical office building on it is not sensitive to the residential uses within this neighborhood. In the autumn of 2010, this commission heard an application for a medical facility for this same site. The application was for a special exception and was for a so-called hospital, which would have consisted of a two-story, 25,000 square foot building and 129 parking spaces. No change of zone was requested. In terms of the building and the layout of the proposed development, that application was very similar to this one. That application was denied by this commission. I was certainly opposed to the previous application, but it was nowhere near as harmful as this one, as it did not request a change of zone to a designed commercial district. There's been a mention that this property is not suitable for single-family residences or residences of any kind. I disagree with that. This lot could be subdivided. There would only be a few homes allowed on it, but it could be subdivided. The question here is not whether you or I want to live on this land. There are people who would give an arm and leg to live in Fairfield. It could be developed for single-family homes, and it's possible with a change of zone to designed residence, it could be used for condominiums or townhouses. I urge you to deny this application for a zone change to designed commercial district, and I urge you to deny the special permit application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rooney.
My name is Carol Weinshell, and I live at 38 Weeping Willow Lane. You've already heard from my husband, but I will tell you that with all due respect to the traffic experts, when the Merit is backed up in the morning, when you try to get out of Weeping Willow Lane, there is virtually no way you can take a right. The folks coming down Jefferson Street feel that you're in competition with them, and they do not let you in. If you want to get out of Weeping Willow, you need to take a left. When you take a left, you find traffic backed up beyond Park Avenue onto Old Town Road. Unless you live there, you have no idea that this is what's going on. And again, with all due respect to the traffic expert, the map did not include Donna Drive, which is also off Jefferson Street, and I doubt seriously that those folks would feel that they were not worthy of some kind of explanation as well. I urge you, it's been my understanding that you folks on the zoning commission are there to protect us, the residents of the area. And I sure hope that that's what you're going to do and not change the zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Weinschel.
My name is Gertrude Clark. I live at 12 Weeping Willow, been there 48 years. I've seen many, many changes, and I hope this is one you're not going to approve. Period. Put me on record.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Any?
My name is Bernard Camaro. I don't live on Weeping Willow, but I do live on 258 Stevenson Road, which is down the bottom of the hill off to the left. Lived there for over 40 years now. We've seen a lot of changes. I've been to a few of these hearings in reference to this piece of property. About 3 times already it was denied. Medical buildings of some sort were tried to put up. Now you got another medical building that wants to go in. I have a question. If this medical building goes in, what do the last people say about, oh, you let them go in, but you wouldn't let me go in? What kind of lawsuit are you guys going to be looking into? What kind of problem is that going to create? You've already denied it several times for basically the same reason, the same type of building. And the footprints that I saw today basically mimic all the other ones I've seen as far as the land goes and the building and the size and the stories and the entrances and the traffic problem there. So, you know, it just keeps coming back and back and back. Now you got a bigger entity trying to do the same thing again. How long do we have to keep fighting something and keep saying no till you get somebody that comes up that's got more power than you have, and then you say, okay, you can do it? You know, stop and realize what's going on here. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Camaro.
My name is Rob Lacey. I live at 583 Jefferson Street. My family have been in Fairfield since 1680. And I've been to a number of these hearings over the course of, I guess, over a decade. And we always talk about the traffic and the traffic issue. And, you know, I just can't underline enough what my neighbor just on Stevenson just said. It's absolutely horrendous. I mean, I can't get out my driveway, let alone Weeping Willow Lane is the same. So, I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable. And to say that we're talking about improvements, traffic improvements, you know, granted, the economy may be slack and we may be having a temporary reduction in traffic for that reason. And I don't argue that, but it's certainly not a permanent, I hope, situation, like the economy anyways. So, but, you know, really setting that aside, the traffic issue to me is not paramount. What is paramount is to change a zone. I think it's an absolutely terrible proposal from that perspective. I say that with deference to the fact that my wife volunteers at St. Vincent's Hospital and has been a patient there many, many times. A couple of my neighbors pointed out that they have ties to the hospital as our family does as well, and it's a wonderful facility. But this is not St. Vincent's Hospital, and what might end up in this location down the road, I don't think that St. Vincent's can tell us. As I understand it, down the road, there's nothing to say that this facility might gravitate away from that use. And the issue of precedent in changing the zone, as one of my other neighbors suggested, to me is absolutely paramount. Where I live, we have the Cinto so-called property next door, and that property has been quote-unquote in play for some time. Setting a precedent here with this property is not going to affect just that one limited parcel, but it's going to affect others in the area as well. And I live in an R3 zone. I'd like to keep it that way as much as possible, if that's at all possible, given the change we've seen over the course of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Hochberg, 232 Churchill Road. I also an RTM member representing District 7, which is where this proposal is at. I just want to put on the record that I stand with the residents of the immediate area in opposing this zone change. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Phyllis Camaro. I live at 258 Stevenson Road. I come up that hill every day to go into Bridgeport, Fairfield, Stratford, wherever I work in Stratford. And they put a stop sign at the top of that hill by the exit entrance on the north side of the parkway. It doesn't work, because we cannot stop at the top of the hill and get any momentum to go. And the traffic that comes off the parkway, half of them don't stop. And I almost got broadsided a couple times by today nobody stops for stop signs. But you can't put a stop sign at the top of that hill. So, because the traffic doesn't move. And if I have to stop and there's a car right behind me, you can't get enough momentum. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Joel Green. I live at 52 Stoneleigh Road in Fairfield, in the Stratfield area, in this same zoning district. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross, and it's my pleasure to appear before you this evening on behalf of the Stratfield Improvement Association, which was established in 1981 and whose mission is to preserve the quality of life in the town's Stratfield neighborhood in which the proposed development is located. First, a disclaimer, and as many of the speakers said well, this is not a referendum or a reflection in any way on the high regard that my clients and I and the members of Stratfield Improvement and I have for the St. Vincent's Medical Center. Certainly, we all support and encourage the mission of the hospital. We all want to see it thrive. We all have friends, neighbors, family who have received medical treatment there, who work there, who volunteer there, or are affiliated with the hospital in one way or another. And as my mother recently reminded me, when she was in St. Vincent's Hospital as a patient, I was born there, by way of full disclosure. At the end of the day, it's not about the St. Vincent's Medical Center, as you heard so eloquently from so many tonight. It's really about the change of zone and the proposed use for this site. And we appear in opposition to the application by St. Vincent's, with all due respect, their application to amend the zoning map and for the special permit. I want to thank the Commission for scheduling this evening and accommodating me, accommodating Attorney Fallon, and we appreciate it. And I know it's another night out, and we truly want to thank you for that. I also want to thank the Commission for your very insightful questions tonight, because it was through your questioning that I developed a new view of this proposal that I will share with you momentarily. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move quickly
because I think we'd all like to see this wrapped up, and I think that was the deal with a special meeting. And so much of what was said by so many covered many of the elements involved, but I will try to highlight and go through this quickly. As it's been stated, we urge you not to change the zone. The primary purpose of a 12.4 of a design commercial district pursuant to 12.4 is to provide for retail uses as well as business and professional offices. We don't feel that that is an appropriate use to be put into this zone. And what I'm going to do is try to hand out some documents quickly. First reason that we urge you not to do that is because it is contrary to the master plan. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, if I could just, if I can hand these just in order to move this along instead of passing them out.
Thank you.
I know you are familiar with the master plan. I know it's already been referenced, but I wanted to be sure that it is specifically in the record. And without getting into tremendous detail, the final sentence on the following final page of the excerpt that I have provided you this evening deals with the Stratfield neighborhood. And again, it does reference the particular development policies, and the final policy that is identified is uses of a commercial and industrial nature should be discouraged. Therefore, plainly, and I feel that the applicant did address certain features and goals of our master plan, but it was not specifically addressed that in Stratfield, and in this area in particular, uses of a commercial nature are to be discouraged. Now, you had asked questions about the taxation of the site, and it was interesting because the answer was, in all instances, this is a commercial use. The first slide that was shown by the applicant that shows these various uses, university, convalescent homes, it showed Ludlow, it showed the Jewish home, it showed Sacred Heart, it showed the high school, it showed the playing fields. As was pointed out, these are all specifically permitted uses in an R3 zone under certain circumstances. So in an R3 zone, again, as you know, there are single-family dwellings and there are certain other uses that are specifically permitted. The applicant did not show this site as being in a residential color on the slide, I noticed, but it is in an R3 zone. There are, as you heard from so many, this is a residential zone. It is a residential area, and a larger view of the area would show that it is largely residential in this area. Two, the proposal, and I'm going to cover, I think I'm going to try to just hit the, again, to move this along. This is the zoning map. Another reason that this should not be done, and I will wait for you to get the document, is this is not something that we have done in Fairfield. Now, certainly, there have been many zone changes. There have been many zone changes that accompany special permits. But if you look at the zoning map, specifically, and I apologize for the size, but you will see, you don't see red dots, and red, again, is design commercial. You don't see red dots, individual properties, which have been converted to, in residential zones. You don't see individual properties. You will notice that the design commercial zones are all merged together. They are continuous zones of several properties. I would say, with the exception of the Hi-Ho, which is about the only design commercial up there on Black Rock Turnpike, and I don't know what came, the chicken or the egg in this one, whether the Hi-Ho predated zoning or not. But with that exception, you don't see individual properties that are design commercial zones. It is not something we have done in this town in the past. And again, isolated parcels, there are not isolated design commercial districts in residential zones. Three, as a matter of planning, the applicant, in its remarks tonight and in its application did not identify any particular need or deficit in our community that justifies the change of zone. There is plenty of office space available in Fairfield. In my travels in the last week, I have seen medical office advertised everywhere. We got into this topic as well on Black Rock Turnpike in the Fairfield Gateway project. And in my travels this week, there are 3 buildings on Black Rock Turnpike that are specifically advertising medical space. At the Circle, there's an office building at the Circle which has medical use in it. I inquired, and there's over 15,000 feet of office vacancy, and that has been used for medical offices in the past and is, in a limited degree, continued to be used for medical offices. On Reef Road, the Reef Road Medical Building has over 8,000 feet of space available. On Sherman Street, the office at 140 Sherman Street has over 4,000 feet of medical space available. Now, you might say these are too small. Maybe St. Vincent's is saying we need 25,000 feet. Well, at 501 Kings Highway, which I believe is the same building as the Board of Ed, there's over 40,000 square feet of medical space available, or space that could be used for medical use. If you look, you'll see there's office space available everywhere. The vacancy rate for Class A office space in Fairfield County is over 20%. And Class B and Class C are significantly higher. So the applicant did not identify any particular need in this community for additional office space that would justify a change of zone of this kind. This is quite simply about business and opportunity. It's not about need. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Business and opportunity is fine. It's important. We talked tonight about the community and economic development. We talked about the regional view of this. Yes, it will increase taxes. Yes, it is a desirable thing, and we want to see good development in our town. But without a need, and a compelling need, there is no reason to have that particular use in this zone. So, as you consider the proposed zone change, consider, is there any particular inadequacy in terms of the amount and availability of medical office space that you're aware of? Is it an adopted policy, goal, or objective of this commission to create or promote the creation of more medical office space by creating, for example, design commercial zones in the middle of residential areas to try to create more office space? Is it an adopted policy or goal or objective of this commission to create or promote the creation of more medical office space such that you want to rezone residential areas? Now, I spend a fair amount of time at your meetings. I read your agendas, I read your minutes, and it's not something that I have seen identified by this commission recently, and it's not something that I've seen identified in this community. And just to really focus the planning notion, absent St. Vincent's and absent this application in this particular site plan, can you conceive of this commission identifying a need right now and spontaneously creating design commercial districts in any residential zone to create a medical office building right now? The proposed use and development, it's not appropriate in this location, and the property should not be rezoned to simply accommodate it. Now, my clients and I believe that this is not an appropriate use in this zone. More accurately, the location, type, and character and size of use in buildings and structures are not in harmony and do not conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, and hinders or discourages appropriate development and use of adjacent property or impairs its value. Now, as you recognize, that comes from Section 27.4.1 of your regulations. When RDR 5520 LLC appeared before you with an application for a special exception to build a substantially identical, two-story, 25,000 square foot hospital on the same footprint, same site, same location on the site, same parking layout, you denied it. This commission denied it. And I have the minutes of that meeting. And this is significant.
Attorney Green, hold on one second. We have to change the tape.
Okay, sure.
It's getting cold in there. That's all right.
This is what we usually do. It's usually 11 o'clock. 3 days.
And you'll see.
Not yet, not yet. We're changing the tape. Now you may continue.
You'll see that in the minutes, it was specifically found, first of all, the Commission finds that the application lacks adequate information to demonstrate that the proposed use is in fact a hospital. Therefore, the Commission finds that pursuant to Section 5.1.4, that the proposed use is not permitted in the R3 zone, because you found that it was, in essence, a medical office building. The Commission also finds that the application fails to satisfy the provisions of Section 27.4.1 of the regulations. I gave you a comparison. Tonight, the applicant appears before you seeking a special permit. And previously, this commission found that the application, the identical site plan, did not meet 27.4.1. I would submit, therefore, that if you made that finding, that a similar finding is merited as to this application, because the requirements for approval, and you have them side by side. 27.4.1 talks about the location, type, character, and use of buildings and structures, that they shall be in harmony, and again, I just read that text, they shall be in harmony with and conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, not hinder or discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent property or impair its value. Tonight, the applicant has to meet the standard, the development as shown shall be of such a character as to harmonize with the neighborhood, to accomplish a transition in character between areas of unlike character, to protect property values in the neighborhood, to preserve and enhance the appearance and beauty of the community, and to avoid undue traffic congestion. I would submit that you've already found, by finding that it did not meet the special exception regulations, and in particular 27.4.1, you've already found that this application, which is substantially identical, and I will submit the site plan from the October 2010, from RDR 5520. I'm going to submit that into the record so that the Commission has it, can see that it's substantially identical. I would submit that before you found that it wasn't in harmony with the development of the town and the neighborhood. And I would suggest that is a broader standard. In this case, they have to show, the applicant must show that it is in harmony with just the neighborhood. Now, the town is a broader area, so it would technically, I suppose, invoke a greater variety of uses in the entire town. In this case, the scale is drawn down to the neighborhood. And you previously found that it was not consistent in the town and the neighborhood. And I would suggest that it's a higher burden to show that it then meets just the neighborhood, as the applicant proposes this evening. Okay. In terms of the precedent, and as the great fear here is that this is a commercial zone that's being brought into a residential area. The great fear is this is an erosion of that fabric, an erosion of the residential character of this area. This is the beginning. And I thought that one of the speakers was very accurate in terms of other properties in the area that would be justified in coming to this commission and seeking the same treatment. On the other side of the parkway, there is a site that is similarly situated. It mirrors this site. in terms of being on the other side of the parkway. It is proximate to the southbound, the exit from the southbound lane of the Merritt Parkway. And that same argument with a good use would apply. And I urge this commission to not begin creating one single property zones on a project-by-project basis. I have the regulations for design business districts, which, and I know the commission is familiar with this, but I'll dispense with highlighting the various uses. They're all in the regulation that I'm providing you with, and all of the many commercial uses in 12.4, and business and professional offices, financial institutions, dental clinics, theaters, hotels, indoor recreational facilities, retail service stores, laundry, and the like, and the list is long. And this is a new departure. It is a new concept in a residential district. And we urge you not to do that, and I'll move on. And it was interesting and instructive that the applicant in its presentation discussed how the needs of hospitals, the goals of hospitals, and in the medical field, in the hospital field, that it's difficult to predict where it goes. And 10 years ago, we couldn't have predicted that this is where we are now. In response to the chairman's question, where it is true, hospitals are acquiring medical practices. And I think the statement was made that 10 years ago, we couldn't have predicted where we'd be today, and it's difficult to predict where we'll be in a year. When I think you asked a question about, I think the question related to a change of use of the property, whether it would become an actual hospital use and not taxable. And so if the use changes and the hospital determines, and again, this is about business and opportunity, if the hospital were determined in a year or 5 years or 10 years that this model does not work anymore, they don't want to have affiliated doctors, or there's a more profitable use of this property, then there's this wide spectrum of potential uses for this 2+ acre site in the middle of a residential zone. And you are exposed to the notion of an applicant coming in with a variety of uses and seeking a special permit. And it was well put that if you meet certain standards, you are bound within certain parameters, as you recognize in your regulations, to allow other uses. And that is, I think, the great fear for so many in the area. Spot zoning. A change of zone that applies only to a small parcel constitutes illegal spot zoning if the change is not harmonious with the comprehensive plan of zoning. The ultimate test is whether, upon the facts and circumstances before the zoning authority, the zone change is primarily an orderly development of existing district which serves a public need in a reasonable way, or whether it is an attempt to accommodate an individual property owner. And the presentation that we saw this evening is, it's really about this property owner and its goals and desires. And it's not in harmony with the comprehensive plan. A zoning commission's reclassification of a small area of land in a manner that disturbs the tenor of the surrounding neighborhood constitutes an illegal exercise of power by the commission. And there's a recent case, Gata, and it really sets forth, it's Gata versus Planning and Zoning Commission. It's 108 Connecticut, Con-App 19, and just it states, spot zoning is impermissible in this state. The vice of spot zoning lies in the fact that it singles out for special treatment a lot or a small area in a way that does not further the comprehensive plan. Action by a zoning authority which gives to a single lot or small area privileges which are not extended to other land in the vicinity is in general against sound public policy and obnoxious to the law. The obvious purpose of the requirements of uniformity in the regulations is to assure property owners that there shall be no improper discrimination, all owners of the same class and in the same district being treated alike. The ultimate test is whether, upon the facts and circumstances before the zoning authority, the zone change is primarily an orderly development of an existing district which serves a public need in a reasonable way, or whether it is an attempt to accommodate an individual property owner. And again, there are several property owners in this area that might seek the same treatment as St. Vincent seeks here. I have the regulation, the Connecticut general statutes as they pertain to zone changes. I'm going to share that with you. And just to take this sort of in backwards order, 8-3 of the Connecticut General Statutes speaks in terms of changing or establishing zones, and it provides that basically it provides the standards under which a zoning change may be granted. I just want to put that into the record. In 8-2, I've highlighted the standards for our regulations, and it just states just briefly, such regulations shall be made in accordance with a comprehensive plan, and again we pointed out that this is not in accordance with a comprehensive plan. And in adopting such regulations, the Commission shall consider the plan of conservation and development prepared under Section 8-23. The regulations shall be designed to lessen congestion in the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, flood, and other dangers, to promote health and the general welfare, to provide adequate light and air, to prevent the overcrowding of land, to avoid undue concentration of population, and to facilitate the adequate provision for transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public requirements. Such regulations shall be made with reasonable consideration as to the character of the district and its peculiar suitability for particular uses, and with a view to conserving the value of buildings and encouraging the most appropriate use of land throughout such municipality. I would suggest that that standard cannot be met, and in particular based on your ruling last October where you found that this use is not in harmony with the neighborhood. And I would suggest that you can't then meet that standard. Now, I have cut down my presentation because this evening I have been looking at this plan now for nearly 2 years. And it wasn't until there was a question asked by Commissioner LeClaire and Commissioner Alessi that it occurred to me that the plan does not begin to meet the zoning standards. And I started scratching out notes, and it was in question as to the use of the property. And Section 25.7 of the regulations sets forth the requirements for approval, and this goes to the special permit. And it says, the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, after public hearing, shall approve an application for a special permit for the establishment of a special permit use if it finds that the proposed use and proposed buildings and structures conforms to the standards applicable in the district in which the special permit use is to be located, conform to any applicable special standards for special exception uses in 27, and conform to the following additional requirements. And it was when you were asking the question about the location of the building on the site, and it didn't occur to me till this evening that, first of all, the requirements for the building does not conform with any of the applicable setback requirements. And that is because under Section 12, if that's in the proposed zone, in the proposed zone it says that, you bear with me for one moment. In terms of the side yard setback, it says adjacent resident district boundaries 12.7.6.4 for adjacent residence district boundary. If you were to approve this plan, it would be a design commercial zone bounding on an R3 zone. The R3 zone requires 15 feet of side yard setback, and I note that the building shown on the plan is 15.1 feet from the side yard. However, I also note that maximum height for a building or structure is 40 feet, and this building is shown at 33.6. And section 12.7.6.6 says, any building or other portion thereof exceeding a height of 30 feet shall be set back 1 foot in addition to the applicable minimum setback requirement for each 3 feet or fraction thereof by which such building or other structure or portion exceeds 30 feet in height. So it's 33.6, therefore there would be another 2 feet that would be required because the R3 zone requires 15 next door, and then it says additional setback. So the building's 33 and change, so that's another 2 feet. But then that started me looking at this site, and it occurred to me that under your regulations, this is, by the definition in your regulations, a corner lot. And it's on the corner of the Merritt Parkway and Park Avenue, because the street lines, a street is defined in your regulations as street line is the right-of-way, easement, or taking line of any public or private street or any easement of access or private right-of-way. And the Merritt Parkway is a state highway and is therefore, I believe under your definitions, a street. And therefore, this property being on Park Avenue and the Merritt Parkway would meet the definition in your regulations for a corner lot. A corner lot is defined as a lot having an interior angle of less than 135 degrees at the intersection of 2 streets, whether public or private. And so the question is that an intersection? Do the streets intersect? I'm sure Attorney Fallon can give you some information on that and discuss that, but I would suggest that the right-of-way is, as the property is identified, regardless of bridges or access, it is located at an intersection of 2 streets based on the property lines. Therefore, in an R3 zone, the setback for a corner lot, it would be 40 feet or 30 feet, I think, on one of the streets under section 5.2.4. But under any circumstances, the building does not meet the site plan standards because it's too close to the side property line in R3 zone, or as a corner lot, that's even further off by a significant distance. I was struck by the fact that the traffic plan did not address the fact that there's as I understand it, a rather significant development planned on the street for the Golf Digest building with, as I understand it, and maybe, I don't know, I don't have any information on this, but I understand that there's a massive development planned within the neighborhood, and I didn't see that accounted for in any way in terms of the traffic counts and the impact on the intersections. Again, the parking lot standards were not met. I think the commission addressed that. Some of the traffic numbers were gathered. I note that some of the state traffic data was gathered in June. That's included in the appendix of the report. I know that Mr. Galante did their own independent traffic counts, but as I understand it, there's reference to state traffic numbers that were referenced in the report that were taken in June. Certainly that's not the best month to be metering the traffic there where the university is out of session. The other thing I would also note is there's been a petition put in that is signed by several members, several residents who have been identified as being within 500 feet. The 500-foot map that was, when I looked at it just now, and I looked at the petition, which I had not seen before, I would suggest that that petition does meet the standards for 8-3 as a protest petition. I would suggest that the 500-foot map that was submitted by the applicant is incomplete and that it does not identify properties in Bridgeport. I believe the statute requires all properties within 500 feet and doesn't discern between Fairfield or Bridgeport. So I think that's an infirmity in the application. But in any event, I would suggest that the application does not meet the site plan requirements set forth in the regulations. More significantly, as has been said so many times by so many in opposition, this is just, we would just urge the commission not to grant a zone change under these circumstances in this zone. And I certainly want to thank you for your generous patience and thank you again for your accommodation. I don't know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Attorney Green.
Thank you.
Is there any final member of the public who wishes to comment? Hearing none, Mr. Fallon.
I don't know how long the commission will be willing to go tonight. I'm probably going to need about a half an hour. Is that all right, since we're here?
I will state that I did complete mine in a summary way.
Well, in about 45 minutes. But should I go on?
You used 2 minutes of your 30 up, so.
Okay. First of all, with regard to the last points, Mr. Green, I disagree with Mr. Green. You can rely on the input from your own staff when you deliberate this, but clearly this is not a corner lot. I don't believe that the regulations as you draw them would render the Merritt Parkway to be a street as your regulations define them. I think that the zone map, we did give notice to everybody within 500 feet, including Bridgeport. The zone map was reviewed by your staff. I think it is in keeping with the regulations. And I also think that the application complies. We've talked about the street trees. We've also talked about, I don't agree with Mr. Green's interpretation on the setbacks, but you can discuss that with your staff. But this application has been thoroughly reviewed through a code enforcement session, and clearly I think that it complies with the technical requirements of the regulations. What I want to talk about, and hopefully as quickly as possible, because we do appreciate your courtesy, are some of the fundamental issues here that were talked about by members of the public. I also would like to say technically, before I go to that I don't believe that does constitute a protest petition, but that again is something that we could discuss with the staff. I think that the protest petition has to have a certain characteristics to it that petition lacks. In any event, that will be a decision the staff will make, and if the staff deems it to be a protest petition, then we're going to have to go through the calculation associated with that. But let me just kind of go through some of the general comments here. And, you know, Mr. Boyarsky and a number of other people talked about traffic. Well, the simple fact of the matter is here, with regard to traffic, which is a fundamental issue with regard to this application, this traffic scenario that is presented to you in this application tonight was, in fact, before you not many months ago. This building was part of the traffic analysis that was part of the Sacred Heart Business School application. This roundabout was specifically one of the components of the Sacred Heart application, and that application was unanimously approved. It's true that the present roundabout, as Sam said, doesn't really work particularly well. This is going to improve it. But at the end of the day, this building is not going to have, I pause to use the word, a significant impact on traffic in this particular area. There is existing heavy traffic in this area. But Mr. Galante's report, I think, speaks to the fact that this 25,000 square foot building is not going to adversely in any significant manner impact this. Plus its components, the building itself and the roundabout, were seen before you and were seen by you as part of a previous application. Can you fire that up for me? With all due respect to Mr. Gallagher, again, it is his house that is shown on that particular view cross-section that's there. I respect his position, but I don't agree with it. This property is not in Mr. Gallagher's backyard. Mr. Gallagher's house does not abut the property. Mr. Gallagher's house lies 300 feet away from the property line and some 675 feet away from the building that we propose to build. It is not the lot next door.
But you can see from this graphic and draw your own conclusions with regard to the impact upon him and any other neighbors on Weeping Willow. There was an overriding concern that Mr. Green, Ms. Rooney, and others talked about, well, what happens if you change the zone and this doesn't get built? Well, not only is that somewhat far-fetched, but the simple fact of the matter is, even if you assume that that St. Vincent's gets these approvals, which it seeks tonight, and then doesn't, in fact, move forward with it, your special permit standards are stringent. Your standards for approval under Section 25 are very, very stringent in terms of taking into considerations when you consider any special permit use, impact on the surrounding area, property values, traffic, and the like. And indeed, as Mr. Green is well aware, and Ms. Rooney too, I'm sure, in the last 10 years, we've seen the courts moving more and more towards upholding Planning and Zoning Commission's application of what are somewhat subjective special permit standards and exercising their discretion in that regard. So that, in fact, if St. Vincent's doesn't build this facility, then nothing's going to happen here until you've looked at it in the context of your special permit standards. Ms. Rooney said that this is primarily a neighborhood that is designed for single-family residences. And if we go back to the other slide, that's really what the fundamental thing you have to grapple with here. And that is, of course, the map I show you. Yes, these are special exception uses. We never said anything differently. But they're all institutional uses. There's no single-family residences that abut this property. There's no single-family residences within outside of 300 feet of this property. It does sit adjacent to the Merritt Parkway. And it's in that sense that your planning function, I think, has to be looked at. The plan of conservation and development speaks to consideration of protecting residential property values. Somebody said that it's your job to protect residents. Well, it is. It's your job, I think they said, to protect residents from harm. But in exercising your planning function, that harm has to be real. And you have to make a judgment. Zone changes are not a plebiscite. What they involve basically is a determination based upon your planning function whether or not it makes planning sense to take advantage of an opportunity to designate a particular piece of property for use. And if the zone change was going to open you up to a multitude of uses that you couldn't control, that would be one thing. But even if you assume that St. Vincent's isn't going to build this building, which is an assumption that obviously is not true, you still maintain control of the property. There was a lot of talk as far as spot zoning. Spot zoning does occur when, in fact, a small piece of property is rezoned in a manner not consistent with the comprehensive plan. 2 points on that. The case law is well settled that areas as small as a half acre, 4/10 of an acre, 1 acre, less than an acre, have all been deemed not to be too small so as to generate a spot zoning finding. So that's the small issue. The second thing with regard to spot zoning is consistency with the comprehensive zoning plan. That's not the plan of conservation and development. That's a term that when you look at the case law, the comprehensive zoning plan is in fact this. It's what has developed in the area. And therefore, there's nothing inconsistent with the comprehensive zoning plan with regard to this application, nor is this parcel of over 2 acres too small. The 2010 application, when you look at what Mr. Green handed out to you, in fact, what you said, your first reason for denial was that the Commission finds that the application lacks adequate information to demonstrate that the proposed use is in fact a hospital. Therefore, the Commission finds that pursuant to Section 5.1.4 that the proposed use is not permitted. You then go on to say in your further findings that he points out, 2, the Commission also finds that the application fails to satisfy the provisions of Section 27.4.1, and that deals with the location, type, character, use of the building. Well, those two were related, as I heard you talking about it the night you made this decision, because I was here, And what you were basically saying was that because the application lacked adequate information to demonstrate that the proposed use is in fact a hospital, you couldn't make a finding that the use satisfied the standards of section 27.4.1. You were all there, and you can speak for yourselves, but I'm clear because I listened, and I don't know if Mr. Green was there or he wasn't, but you weren't saying that this site plan doesn't meet the standards of 27.4.1. You were saying that the information you had been given didn't give you sufficient basis to make a finding that section 27.4.1 had been satisfied. And that's why you established the two reasons that you did. And your 2010 denial was not based upon a finding that a use of a 25,000 square foot medical office building would not be appropriate. What you were concerned about was that the proper procedures had not been followed. And there were comments, and I can't honestly remember by who, but somebody actually did say that what they should do here is come in and apply for a change of zone so that we know exactly what we're dealing with. And we heard that, and that's what we did. Now, there are some other minor points, but I will briefly address them. The site engineering, I don't know where the idea of the two-year storm, this has been designed to the standards of the state, the engineering department, and the Conservation Commission to meet storms of sufficient capacity as our town regulations require. The sewer approval I've already discussed. The town, the city of Bridgeport granted the sewer connection in 2009 for the previously proposed 25,000 square foot medical use building. We have confirmed with the city that in fact that use and that approval applies to us, and so we can in fact, hook into the city sewers. Joel talks about, 4,000 square feet here, 8,000 square feet here. The simple fact of the matter is that is not St. Vincent's Medical Center as a healthcare provider resource in this region, having the opportunity with 25,000 square feet of space to establish, affiliated physicians' offices at this location. It's a totally different thing. And in fact, the town's Economic Development Commission and the Greater Bridgeport Regional Council also spoke to that and found that to be the case. So that really, to go around and say, well, there's 4,000 square feet available on Reef Road, et cetera, doesn't make much sense. I spoke to you earlier about the plan of conservation and development. It speaks directly, I'm not going to read it again, to these very issues that I think are relevant here to coordinate health facilities within the region to meet the needs of people. That's really what we're talking about. And there shouldn't just be a blanket approach to planning. You can call yourself the zoning commission. Drop the planning function right now. If the rubric's going to be, we're never going to change a zone. I mean, once we've zoned it residential, time and circumstances notwithstanding, we don't change the zone. If that's how you feel, then we should just be the Fairfield Zoning Commission. Because you have to, under the very statutes that Mr. Green provided you, you have to provide yourself with the opportunity as time and circumstances and developments of areas change to deal with what you think is prudent change by way of amending your zone map from time to time. And this application is a classic case of what that's all about. We're coming here before you tonight and we're asking you to take due consideration of your plan of conservation and development. We're asking you to take due consideration of the fact that we have this isolated parcel adjacent to the Merritt Parkway, surrounded by all these institutional, educational, health-related issues. Take consideration of the fact that you've already seen our building in a previous application. You've already seen the traffic circle in a previous application, which you've approved. And consider what makes good sense from a planning standpoint. In the final analysis, when you look at two things, you have to look at the standards for zone changes. And everybody's talked about that tonight. You look at whether or not you think that under these particular circumstances, and taking into consideration all those circumstances, and the plan of conservation and development,
it's reasonable and rational to assume that the use that's proposed is a good one for this area and the zone change is warranted. Your regulations require that an application for change of zone must be accompanied by a special permit application. You want to exert control over your discretion to change zones as a property, so you know what your zone change will facilitate. Here you have that as required by your regulations, but you also have St. Vincent's Medical Center with its 100-year track record in the community standing behind this project, a project which I think everybody agrees is extremely attractive in its architectural design and its landscaping and its general aesthetics and how it will fit into and benefit the area. The second thing you have to look at is your special permit standards as set forth in Section 25. I'm not going to read them to you. You know them. But at the end of the day, when you go through each and every one and you balance it against the evidence we provided with regard to the architectural design of the building, with regard to the traffic issues, everything points to one thing, that an irrational, reasonable approach to planning and zoning, this use that we propose, anchored by St. Vincent's Medical Center, is an absolutely appropriate and beneficial use for this site at this location in this general area and will not have any adverse impact on the neighborhood. You should always, and I'll be the first one to say it, protect residential neighborhoods from harm, as somebody said. But you have to be realistic in your planning function and sometimes take the heat, although I've been in rooms with a lot more heat than this, and say, here, there really isn't harm. The harm here could be in not changing the zone of the property. And this isn't going to be developed for residential purposes. You'd have rear lot issues. You'd have to bring a road in. You'd have all sorts of issues relating to wetlands and other factors. So this is what it is. So you really got to ask yourself, is somebody going to come in on this piece of property, one, and build a single-family home? I don't think so. Ms. Rooney actually opened the door to multifamily development. I don't think that's as good a use for the property in terms of impact on the neighborhood of what we propose. So at the end of the day, I guess that's why you guys and ladies get paid the big bucks. This is an application where there are people, segments of the neighborhood, but not an overwhelmingly huge turnout, that don't want to see the zone changed. That's really the essence of it. They really haven't said anything bad about the building. They have said nice things about St. Vincent's Medical Center. They really haven't said much about the traffic, other than the existing traffic is pretty bad up there at certain times of the day, and the existing traffic circle is horrible, which, by the way, this application addresses. They ask you just to say, blindly, we don't change zones. Well, you have the right to say that. But I hope you won't, because you denude yourself then of your planning function. And you can't deny a zone change on the basis of saying, well, we're not going to change the zone, unless you feel that the change of zone is going to cause, and I'll use the word again, harm. If you really feel that this application, this building, at this location, is going to harm this neighborhood or the somewhat more distant residential owners, then deny it. That's what you should do. But it's just not factual. It's not going to happen. What will happen is that this piece of property will be put to an attractive, community-benefiting use that will not have any adverse impact, as you've already reviewed it in the previous application, I guess, on traffic in the area, won't have any adverse impact on any residential property values, distant though they may be, and I think will represent a very good exercise of your planning function. There are isolated pieces of property, like this one, unique, I admit, as this neighborhood has developed. But if you're just going to say there's nothing to talk about if the property, in order to be properly utilized, has to be changed in zone, to me that's not good planning. And this commission has worked very hard and always continues to do good planning.
You're studying various issues. You spend a lot of time studying other areas of town. Commerce Drive comes around. You give to your time. Don't just determine that because a handful of neighbors, with all due respect, feel that this neighborhood, that the zone shouldn't be changed as a matter of principle,
Folks, you got to be quiet and let him speak. You had your chance, he gets his chance.
that provides a valid or fundamentally right reason just to deny the zone change and allow this property to languish to whatever future it's going to have. So I again appreciate you taking the opportunity for us to come before you tonight for a special meeting. We're ending more or less on time, and we appreciate very much your attention and consideration of this, and I hope you will give it serious consideration, because this would be, as the Economic Development Commission says, as the regional agency says, and as I think if you take an objective look at it, a very good thing for this property, a very good thing for this town, and a very reasonable exercise of your planning function. You don't change zones often, you shouldn't, but that doesn't mean you never should. And this is one of those chances and times when I think you really should change this zone to facilitate this use. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Fallon. This will now close the public hearing on this application, and the meeting will stand in adjournment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, both.